Traitor's Hymn. A starter adventure for Warhammer 40,000, Wrath and Glory. Introduction. Traitor's Hymn is an introductory adventure for the Wrath and Glory role-playing game, set in the universe of Warhammer 40,000. Wrath and Glory is a fast-paced game of sci-fi action and horror. If you're already a Warhammer 40,000 fan, you'll find a lot of familiar elements here. If not, don't worry. We'll explain concepts as they become important. You'll find all the details of enemies at the end, pages 46 to 48, and other reference material such as conditions and weapon traits on convenient handouts. Traitor's Hymn is designed to be run with the iconic characters included in this boxed set, who are referred to throughout the adventure as agents. If you have fewer than 5 players, you can treat one of the agents as a communal asset with all the players making the decisions for them. This is a useful way of making sure your group can still benefit from their assistance, information, and skills. We don't recommend trying to run more than one agent this way. We also recommend playing through Traitor's Hymn with the agents provided. Their backstories tie into the plot, so you'll get the most out of the adventure by using them. What is a role-playing game? A role-playing game, or RPG, is a game in which a group of people tell a story together with rules that guide how the story goes. In many role-playing games, like this one player takes the role of the game master, or GM, while the others make up characters to play. The GM describes scenes so everyone can imagine them and comes up with enemies for the characters to fight. Sometimes a game master makes up their own story, and sometimes they run a pre-written adventure like this one. If you're not the GM for this adventure, stop reading now. Role-playing games have a set of rules that help you tell the story in a dramatic way where the stakes are high and success feels exciting. We'll introduce these rules as you go. We've simplified some rules for this adventure, but you can find more detailed explanations and more options in the Wrath and Glory rulebook. For this adventure, you won't need the rulebook, as we've included everything you need to run the game. In this boxed set, you'll find a number of 6-sided dice, 7 black and 1 red, tokens to represent wrath, glory, and ruin points, and character sheets. You might want something to draw extra maps on, such as grid paper, a dry whiteboard, or just plain sheets of paper, to help your players visualize everyone's position in a fight. Rolling dice and making tests. Wrath and Glory uses 6-sided dice, or D6s, for all tests. These are denoted as D6, so one 6-sided die is 1 DSIX, 2 are 2 DSIX, and so on. We'll go into the mechanics of the game in more detail as we introduce them through the adventure, but in a typical test, you roll a number of D6s equal to our character's relevant attribute plus their relevant skill. Then count up how many icons you have rolled. Each die that comes up as a 4 or 5 counts as 1 icon, and a 6 is called an exalted icon, which means it counts as 2. If the player has rolled enough icons to meet or exceed the DN, their agent succeeds at whatever they were trying to do. For instance, if the GM calls for a DN5 leadership, will, test, Honoria's player takes dice equal to Honoria's willpower, will, of 3 and her leadership of 4, for a total of 7 dice. She is aiming to get 5 icons, and she rolls 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, 6. The 4s and 5s provide 1 icon each and the 6 provides 2 icons, meaning she meets the difficulty number, DN, of 5 and succeeds at the test. Synopsis. In Traitor's Hymn, the player characters are newly recruited agents of the powerful rogue trader Jackal Varonius, see the Flotilla Guide, page 8, each having recently proved themselves useful in some way. They are on board a void ship called the Herald Varonius as it transports influential guests from the planets of the Gilead system to the Varonius flotilla. During a banquet, an unexpected storm drags the Herald into the chaotic alternate dimension known as the Warp, the realm of demonkind. The Gellar field is activated, sheathing the ship in a bubble of real space. This protects the crew against the powerful psychic eddies of the Warp, but it is malfunctioning, fluctuating alarmingly. Captain Galba tasks the agents with making their way through the demon-infested ship to restore the Gellar field. Like most citizens of the Imperium, the agents know almost nothing about the existence of demons, and will be horrified to discover the unnatural and terrifying foe they face. Perhaps more disturbingly, they will discover that this corruption, a demonic disease known as the Gellarpox, was intentionally brought aboard the Herald by misguided crew who have turned from the Emperor's light. The agents will have to purge this taint from the ship, defeating the cultists, mutants, and demons, and either destroying or cleansing the infected Gellar field generator that lies at the heart of the infestation. As the Herald Varonius returns to the real space, Jackal Varonius sends an Astartes kill team of the Absolvers chapter to cleanse the ship, further indebting himself in the process. As a reward, the rogue trader grants the agents command of the Herald to use in further service to him, assuming the unfortunate ship survives the adventure. Starting the game. When players have selected their iconic character, go through the character's connections, secrets, and objectives as a group. The players should agree on their connections with one another, choose one or more secrets. They can choose whether or not to tell other players their secret, and choose one objective. When they achieve their objective, they gain a point of wrath immediately. At your discretion, you could allow players to replace an objective when they achieve it to potentially earn additional points of wrath across the adventure. Make a note of their objectives so you can throw in opportunities to achieve them. Ask questions about the players' choices and agents' backgrounds. It's possible that the agents may wish to engage with elements that aren't fully defined, such as the note passed to Traitor or the letter Elata is carrying, so feel free to flesh these out yourself or work with your players to do so. There's no reason the GM should be solely responsible for building the world. These secrets are tools for the whispering voices of chaos to use against the agents, but they are also story sparks you can build into future adventures. Comfort and safety. While the world of Warhammer 40,000, Wrath and Glory is one of horror, cruelty, and violence, we want everyone who plays to have fun. To help players feel safe, comfortable, and happy, you should have a discussion at the start of the game about what sort of things people don't want to see in the game. Players may wish to exclude some subjects entirely, have a warning when it might appear, or only refer to it, rather than describing what's happening. Wrath and Glory can be an intense game, so regular breaks are useful to keep everyone comfortable anyway. If someone, including you, wants content excluded from this adventure, rewrite it however you need to. In Traitor's Hymn, the player's characters have been recruited as agents of Jackal Varonius, a cunning and accomplished rogue trader and the de facto ruler of the desperate Gilead system. The agents are currently on board the Herald Varonius, a void ship used to transport Varonius' most valued guests, en route to join the rogue trader aboard the Varonius flotilla. Captained by Marcel Ingalba, the Herald Varonius is maintained at great expense in an attempt to preserve something of the now threadbare opulence it once possessed. The captain is one of the first characters the agents will encounter, and the first character you will be role-playing, so it's worth reading up about him on page 17. Among the Stars. In the long days since the ship left port from Gilead Primus, the agents have slept in quarters of outrageous luxury by the standards of the Imperium, enjoying bedding only a few decades old, unprocessed food, and even some leisure time. The journey has been quiet and the ship is nearing its rendezvous with the flotilla. Captain Galba has gathered his guests in one of the Herald's 3 magnificent banquet halls for a fine dinner to celebrate the end of the journey. The agents have their equipment, armor, and weapons, as is customary when dining in the great banquet hall. Dinner is served. Located in the prow of the Herald Varonius, the great banquet hall was once a fine affair. Ancient marble floors are now worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, and sections of a once stunning mural spanning the vaulted ceiling have clearly been retouched by far less capable hands. The most recent element of the decor is a series of tapestries depicting star maps and constellations visited by the rogue trader, their coarse auto-loomed weave at odds with the ancient, if faded, finery. Strange smells permeate the room, spices and seasonings unknown to most imperial citizens applied liberally to meals of various synthetic foods. To one side the herald's figurehead, that of a swooping eagle in flight, covers one wall. The screen set into it show the view through the eagle's eyes of the stars beyond. Captain Galba turns to the other guests seated around the table and introduces each of the player characters as valued agents of the Varonius dynasty. To ease the players into the game, we've provided a short flashback for each agent that includes some dice rolls for them to make. This is a great chance for the players to describe their agents and show off their abilities. While these scenes should be short and snappy, you should also ask the player questions and give them opportunities to take an active role in the scene. The specific skills for the tests are suggestions, so if a player wants to use a different skill and attribute, just use the same DN and substitute the new skill and attribute. If you don't have much time to play, you can leave these vignettes out and refer to the scene when the NPCs or items in question come up later in the adventure. Making a test. Whenever an agent does something that has an element of risk, or where failure could make the story more interesting, they make a test. In a typical test, the GM defines the skill used for the test and gives the test a difficulty number, DN, depending on how challenging it is. In Traitor's Hymn, a lot of the tests have a defined skill and DN, but if a test comes up that isn't listed, choose a relevant skill and set an appropriate DN. DN 3 is standard difficulty, something that carries a risk of failure but that a skilled agent is likely able to manage, whereas DN 5 is challenging, meaning that the test involves significant risk and potentially unpleasant consequences for failure. Tests are written as DN 3 Leadership, FEL, tests which tells you the skill and attribute that make up the pool, or just the attribute if they do not have the skill, and the difficulty number. To make a test, a player rolls a number of d6s equal to their attribute plus their skill. The player counts up how many icons they have rolled. Each die that comes up as a 4 or 5 counts as 1 icon, and a 6 is called an exalted icon, which means it counts as 2. If the player has rolled enough icons to meet or exceed the DN, their agent succeeds at whatever they were trying to do. We recommend that for these opening vignettes, you keep the tests really simple. Later we'll introduce concepts like the Wrath die, the option of shifting icons, bonuses or penalties to the DN of tests, and how to spend Wrath and Glory points. Agent flashbacks. These flashbacks occur as agents are introduced. As Captain Gellar goes around the table, he will inquire as to exactly why the agent makes a suitable or useful agent of the Varonius dynasty. As he does, the flashback begins. The Psyker. Gellar turns to you, Somnus, somewhat quizzically. A Psyker, even a sanctioned one, is a dangerous thing. Why does my Lord Varonius think he can rely on you, Somnus? As you consider Gellar's question, you cannot help but think back to recent events. As a potentially dangerous sanctioned Psyker, Somnus's movements and actions are tightly controlled, and any assignments are usually both strange and dangerous. Still, the sudden order to accompany Artina Caldo, the elegant archivist of the Herald Varonius, to an auction of old books was a particularly odd duty. The auction takes place on Imperia, the richest moon of Gilead Primus, very distant from the dank and dangerous streets of the planet's overpopulated hive cities far below. The flashback begins as Artina asks Somnus to review a collection of books from the library of the late Lady Maldonado, all on the topic of imperial travel through the warp. Somnus can make a DN 3 Scholar, Int, test. With a success, the Psyker realizes that several of these books cover banned topics, including one titled Invocations of the Emperor Indignant, which details several religious practices that deviate from the rigorously enforced standards of the Imperial Creed. On a failure, Somnus finds the books to be somewhat obscure, but ultimately uninteresting. Either way, Somnus notices that Artina is watching carefully, clearly looking for some reaction. Regardless of what Somnus does, she seems somewhat disappointed and relieved. Though she does not explain this, the archivist expected some of the books to resonate with the Psyker, which is why Artina brought him here. The Ripple in the Warp. After reviewing the books, Artina departs to prepare for the auction. Have Somnus make a DN 3 Senescence test using Psychic Mastery, Will. This is an ability that psychically sensitive characters, those with the Psyker keyword, all have, which allows them to sense the influence of the warp, a realm of raw, chaotic psychic energy. Most Psykers do not fully understand their powers, however, and very few know anything at all about the true nature of the warp itself. As the player makes their roll, read the following: Somnus, you can sometimes sense otherworldly energies in other people or objects. How do you sense these forces? You might see them in the air, smell a strange scent, or even taste something distinctive. If Somnus succeeds, they sense something unnatural in the room. Before the source can be traced, a man bundled up in threadbare robes catches the Psyker's eye. What skin Somnus can see is tinged with a subtle greenish color. If Somnus fails, he feels confused and a little feverish, and a sound almost like static invades his ears as the stranger watches him intently. In either case, before Somnus can react, the figure disappears into the crowd. Artina returns, and is not at all interested in the man. If the issue is raised with her, she will bring the conversation around to the books. If Somnus failed the initial scholar test, the flashback ends here. Otherwise, continue to the banned books on the next page. The banned books. Somnus, what do you do about the banned books? Do you report them to the auctioneer as dangerous blasphemy, or warn Artina so she is aware of what she is buying? Artina knows exactly what she is here to purchase. If Somnus warns her, she compliments the psycher's eye for detail, and inquiries if any of the books felt unusual to him in any other way. Regardless of the answer, she buys the books. Both Artina Caldo and the mysterious man reappear in the Libris Altus section of the adventure, see page 30, where the mysterious man is revealed to be Sullius the Drowned, one of the leaders of a chaos cult. He intends to use invocations of the Emperor Indignant to conduct a blasphemous ritual. If Somnus reports the books to the auctioneer, Artina is less friendly. She still acquires the books, but is forced to pay some significant bribes to do so. She thinks less of Somnus as a result. Psychic powers. Characters with the psyker keyword, such as Somnus, usually have at least one psychic power, and can buy more with XP. Within the Imperium, psychic abilities and the psykers who wield them are viewed as dangerous channels for the energies of the warp, and unsanctioned psykers are hunted down without question or mercy. Each psychic power includes details of its requirements and effect, DN, activation time, duration, range, and number of targets. No matter the activation time, a psyker can only activate one power per round. Psychic powers usually involve a psychic mastery, will, test made against the listed DN for the power. If a power says it may be sustained, the Skyer may maintain it for as long as they wish, but the distraction causes +2 DN penalty per sustained power on all tests they make until they stop sustaining it. The Sister of Battle. Galba turns to you, Sister Honoria, and smiles. I hardly need you to justify your presence here, Sister Honoria. Morstan hasn't stopped talking about the assistance you rendered to him on Enoch. He tells an interesting tale. Inevitably, your mind wanders back to the event in question. The shrine world of Enoch is packed with numerous pilgrims who have been living in increasingly atrocious conditions since Gilead was cut off from the Greater Imperium. Morstan 5, the commander of the armsmen aboard the Herald, brought his people to the planet to assist with the eradication of some orcs who invaded Enoch via on a crude rock, essentially a hollow asteroid with an engine attached. An established orc presence on Enoch would have been devastating for the already hard-pressed world. Faith in the Emperor. Characters who are particularly faithful to the God Emperor can acquire faith talents. Faith talents require the expenditure of a faith point by the agent using them. Faith is restored to maximum at the start of each session, and the GM may choose to restore faith points for particularly pious acts. The Wavering Lieutenant. Sister Honoria left her period of martial penance and prayer in the Shrine of St. Bertol to assist Fife in assaulting the orcs, bringing with her a complement of sister novitiates on the cusp of completing their training. The flashback begins as Honoria accompanies a unit of armsmen led by Fife's lieutenant, Emsley Bardot. Honoria watches as the young lieutenant stumbles through a terrible, nervous speech intended to encourage her troops. She is clearly inexperienced, and her nervousness is spreading through her unit. Ask Honoria's player if she would like to intervene. If so, they can make a DN3 leadership, will, test to encourage and inspire Emsley and her troops. If the test is successful, Lieutenant Bardot's faith is reinvigorated. Her nervousness fades, her training reasserts itself, and she performs competently in the coming battle. If Honoria fails the test or decides not to intervene, Bardot is ashamed by her own wavering faith. She orders her troops competently, but takes a foolish risk in an attempt to impress the armsmen she commands, ending up grievously wounded. Leading the novitiates. Ask Honoria to make a DN3 ballistic skill A, or weapon skill I, test to see how well she does in the fight. If she succeeds at the ballistic skill or weapon skill test, she leads the novitiates with exemplary faith and competence, driving back the orcs and slaying the largest of them, a hulking, armored beast sporting an oversized gun and a rack of grisly trophies. On a failure, she fights with skill, but the massive orc slays one of her novitiates before it is struck down. Aftermath. As the ash of battle settles, Morstan Fife asks for your opinion on Lieutenant Bardot's leadership. What do you tell him? Morstan Fife appears again in the first scene of this adventure, and Lieutenant Bardot appears in the scene Crossfire, page 27. If Honoria spoke well of her to Fife, she idolizes the sister, and will be wearing a small pin of St. Berthal on her uniform. If Honoria spoke ill of her to Fife, Bardot has been demoted to sergeant, and will be quite fearful of Honoria. In either case, Honoria's abbess has assigned her to assist the Veronius flotilla. Depending on her performance with the novitiates, Honoria may see this either as a reward or a punishment. In truth, it is neither. The abbess has dreamt of a terrible evil that is to befall the fleet, and hopes that Honoria can help to avert it. The Space Marine. Galba's eyes fall on you, Marius, and for a moment you see his mask of haughty command slip. He recovers quickly, and speaks. A new, Astates scout of the Absolvers chapter. You are here no doubt to prove yourself worthy of joining your storied brethren? Worthiness is indeed on your mind as of late. Recently, Marius completed a mandatory recuperation period after the latest of the many procedures required to become an Astates. Only one more remains: the implantation of the black carapace that facilitates the use of a full suit of Astates power armor. However, before that final step can be taken, a candidate must prove themselves worthy of the honor. Among the Absolvers, it is traditional to serve as leader to a group of mortal warriors. First, the duty chosen for Marius was to assist the Veronius flotilla as he saw fit. Distress Beacon. The Arvus lighter taking Marius to the Herald Veronius received a distress call from a damaged voidship, one involved in a raid on a derelict space hulk some weeks earlier. The ship seemed to have been drifting through the void for several weeks, and the Arvus lighter pilot was obliged to investigate, docking with the ship's battered cargo bay. Signs of battle were everywhere, but the ship seemed powered and there was a chance some crew survived. Read the following aloud. Marius, there are but 4 warriors aboard your vessel: yourself, and 3 armsmen, mortal soldiers with experience, but none of your enhancements and only a fraction of your training. The ship must be searched, but the dangers are unknown. Do you scout ahead of them, which will doubtless take longer, or trust in the armsmen to fulfill their duty to the Emperor and search the ship alongside you? If Marius leads the armsmen, their clumsy movements make stealth impossible, and the group is attacked by a Genestila, a horrifying Xenos creature. Have Marius make a DN3 ballistic skill A test. If he is successful, he fells the Genestila with the armsmen suffering only minor injuries. If he fails, he kills the beast, but only after it slays all but one of the armsmen, a young sergeant called Kravis. By searching the ship more thoroughly, Marius and Kravis do manage to locate some survivors and successfully evacuate them just before their supply of air expires. If Marius chose to search the ship ahead of the armsmen, have him make a DN3 stealth A test. If successful, he locates the Genestila nest undetected and ambushes the beast as it returns from a hunt. The creature is killed and the armsmen spared any danger, but a later search of the ship finds the victims of the creature's final hunt were the last surviving members of the ship's crew. If Marius fails the stealth test, the creature notices him as it returns. Marius is almost killed, but manages to slay the beast, though not before it shreds his scout sniper rifle. Marius begins play without this weapon. Aftermath. Marius may encounter Sergeant Kravis later during the course of this adventure. If Kravis was the sole survivor of the trio of armsmen, he considers himself and Marius to have a bond forged in blood, and will help him in any way he can. Conversely, if the armsmen all survived, they will have spread rumors of Marius's bravery among the others, and all armsmen aboard the Herald will be in awe of the scout. Regardless of Marius' actions, a response to his report on the encounter awaits him when he arrives on the Herald. His captain will berate him regardless of his actions, either for not making use of the resources at his disposal, or for placing too much faith in mortal warriors. Such is the lot of an Astates scout. There is room for improvement in all aspects. Technology in the Imperium. Technology is overwhelmingly based on ancient design rather than innovation. New inventions are seen as dangerous and heretical, as anything worthy was discovered long ago, and all research should be directed towards better understanding the principles of the past. The citizens of the Imperium barely understand most machinery, and entrust the Adeptus Mechanicus with their curatorship. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus carry sacred unguents used to bless mechanisms and appease the machine spirits within. Technology in the Imperium also has a horrific element. Criminals and unworthy citizens are converted into more useful forms such as servitors, lobotomized cyborgs modified to perform a specific function. Exceptional Imperial citizens may also have their skulls preserved as servo skulls, which are a common sight on battlefields and among the administratum, levitating as they act as communications hubs, clerical assistants, or performers of all manner of other functions. The Skitarius. Galba's pale, organic eyes alight on your own far superior implants, Traitor. He speaks, and you, soldier of the Mechanicus, what business do the tech magi have with our noble rogue trader? Your mind scurries through its stores of information, and you recall your own arrival on the Herald. Traitor was dispatched to the Herald Veronius by his superiors a few days ago, not as a prospective servant of Jackal Veronius, but to provide support to the tech priests tasked with maintaining the ancient systems of the Voidship. A number of issues in the formidable engines of the Herald were detected, each suspicious in their own esoteric ways, and the presence of an experienced combatant was deemed algorithmically advisable. The flashback begins with Traitor escorting tech priest Broder Abel as they investigate fluctuating power loads in the dark halls of the maintenance corridors. Broder is an exacting tech priest with multiple tools built into his arms, and a mass of skittering mechanical legs. Broder's primary responsibility and overriding obsession is to tend to the technology of the Hydroponics Garden aboard the Herald, page 37, and he expresses a wish to return there repeatedly between performing the rote blessings of sacred mechanisms. As they walk through the vaulted engine rooms of the Herald towards the Gellar field sanctum, Traitor spots some strange corrosion on the nearby mechanisms. Have Traitor make a DN3 Tech int test. If successful, Traitor explains the issue well, using the correct terms in the lingua technis to convince the tech priest it is worthy of his attention. Uttering spirit of this machine, recount thy history to me, Broder interrogates a nearby cogitator, discovering that the parts were properly serviced recently and should not show such advanced corrosion. Broder marks the issue for further investigation. If the test is failed, Broder explains the logical flaws in Tree's poorly explained concerns, and tells the Skitarius to stick to matters he is more familiar with, saying the following: your duty concerns spirits of destruction, Skitarius. Allow my expertise to tend to these more subtle machine spirits of locomotion. Encountering Thaddeus. Either way, as the pair depart, have Traitor make a DN3 awareness int test. If he succeeds, he hears a soft voice singing with a buzz of static underneath, and rounds a corner to see a member of the menial crew running a cloth reverently over a piece of machinery. If Traitor fails, he surprises the menial and doesn't hear the singing. The menial servant looks nervous and guilty as he scuttles away. Traitor, do you report the menial to Broder Abel for interfering with the engines in a way that could agitate the machine spirit, or do you write it off? If Traitor reports the menial, Broder Abel will mention he is named Thaddeus and is both known to him and entirely harmless, claiming the following: the one designated Thaddeus is among the few menials who show proper respect to these mechanisms. In another life, he might have served the Amnesia well. Leave him to his duties. In fact, Thaddeus is an agent of the chaos cult known as the Festering Abundis, who have been spreading corrupted machine oil, inviting the touch of chaos corruption into the Herald. If Traitor reports Thaddeus, the cultist overhears. He later recognizes Traitor in the final confrontation as someone who attempted to interfere with his plans and attacks him directly. Influence. When an agent uses their position or reputation to make an order or a material request, they make an influence test. Influence tests are used when a character's rank, title, or position matter, as opposed to persuasion or leadership tests to convince or order people to do what they want. An agent's influence rating is equal to their fellowship 1. If you share a keyword with the target of your influence test, you gain +1 bonus dice for every keyword you share. So, if Lachlan makes an influence test to negotiate food from Ostia for the laborers of Igni, she would have a dice pool of her influence of 4, +1 for sharing the Imperium keyword, for a total of 5. After making an influence test, you may spend wealth to add icons to the result on a 1-for-1 basis. This could represent bribery or an ostentatious display of affluence, such as buying someone a glass of expensive synth wine. Spent wealth is permanently lost and can only be regained by obtaining more resources, but you can assume Lachlan has replenished her wealth after this flashback. The rogue trader. Galba's eyes alight on you, Lachlan, and he raises an eyebrow quizzically. Lachlan, I was under the impression that your offshoot of the Varonius dynasty was languishing in disgrace. Imagine my delight to see I was misinformed. You will serve our Lord Varonius well, I presume? Lachlan casts her mind back to her tour of Igni, an asteroid mining facility on a space station in the Voidmire. Igni was a recent acquisition for Lachlan, the right to oversee the mining facility, the latest in a long line of profitable ventures undertaken in her ongoing attempts to rehabilitate her reputation. The flashback begins with her arrival to Igni, greeted with the pomp and ceremony befitting her status, but things go downhill quickly. A facility administrator named Callius nervously guides Lachlan and her entourage, weaving a winding path through the facility whilst babbling incessantly about the challenges facing the station. Callius' tour is carefully planned, designed to avoid certain sections of the expansive facility. His babbling is intended to make questioning him difficult, as every answer is swallowed up by labyrinthine tangents and explanations. As a trader skilled in speechcraft, this seems suspicious to Lachlan. Lies within lies. Ask Lachlan to make a DN3 Insight, Fel, test. If she succeeds, she realizes that Callius is trying to keep her away from the worker habitation decks. Furthermore, security personnel seem both sparse and tense. The handful of Astra Militarum troopers all wearing the insignia of the Gilead gravediggers are few in number and clearly nervous. If she fails, Lachlan is unsure what Callius is trying to keep from her, though the lieutenant who leads the military portion of her entourage points out the situation with the guards. Lachlan, Callius is clearly hiding something. Do you dispatch one of your attendants to investigate the station while you distract Callius, or do you press the matter with the administrator yourself? If Lachlan presses Callius, his nervous demeanor only worsens, and he sputters meaningless excuses while explaining very little. Have Lachlan make a DN3 Persuasion, Fel, test. If successful, Callius collapses, sobbing. He explains that a worker revolt is ongoing, and production has almost entirely stalled. Most of the station's troopers are engaged in trying to put down the revolt, but have struggled against superior numbers. If she fails, Callius denies everything until one of the frustrated guards nearby rushes forward to explain the situation. If Lachlan dispatches a spy, have her make a DN3 Insight, Fel, test. If she succeeds, she chooses the right attendant for the job, a death cult executioner whose loyalty she inherited from an estranged uncle. The whispering assassin returns an hour later to inform her of the revolt. If she fails, she dispatches a less competent attendant, who still returns with news of the revolt, but also bearing a fatal stab wound that swiftly claims his life. Containing the revolt. It is clear that dealing with the revolt is beyond Callius, as means resolving the issue and securing an important supply of minerals falls to Lachlan. How do you wish to deal with the revolt? You have sufficient armsmen with you to execute a violent suppression, but they are trained to repel boarding actions in brutal close-range combat and will inflict significant casualties. Alternatively, you may attempt to negotiate with the leaders of the revolt yourself. If Lachlan chooses to suppress the revolt violently, it takes 3 days and results in many casualties. However, mining resumes, though the lack of workers does result in diminished output. Disappointed with the sudden drop in productivity, Varonius summons Lachlan to explain herself in person, lumping her in with several other lower-ranking agents to underline his displeasure, resulting in her presence on the Herald. No good deed goes unpunished. Alternatively, Lachlan may negotiate with the leaders of the revolt, whose demands mostly consist of greater food rations. Lachlan has a contact on Ostia who can easily provide the required food. If she wishes, Lachlan can make a DN3 influence test to arrange this. If she fails, there is little option but to suppress the revolt with violence. If Lachlan refuses to do so, someone else will have to, and she is summoned to answer for her failure to Varonius directly. If Lachlan succeeds, productivity actually increases, resulting in an initial improvement in her reputation. However, word gets out of her under-the-table deal on Ostia. Enraged at Lachlan for going behind his back to establish a trade route, but unable to censure her directly, Jackal assigns her to the Herald as a trade advisor, to Captain Galba a clear insult. Lachlan's reputation precedes her. If she dealt with the revolt on Igni violently, then the armsmen aboard the Herald view her favorably, knowing that she appreciates their particular talents. If she chose the more diplomatic route, Lachlan enjoys the good favor of Lord Radovar Meldrake, who hopes to take advantage of her contacts on Ostia. Aeldery. Due to their alien nature, all Aeldery suffer from the intense emotion trait, which increases the DN of all resolve tests they make by +1. If an Aeldery character fails a willpower test in a scene involving emotions, the GM gains 1 ruin. Aeldery often walk many paths across their lives. In the past, Elata walked the path of awakening, focused on perceiving the world around him. This means he has +1 on all awareness, int, tests, already included on his sheet. The Imperium fears and loathes aliens, or Xenos as they call them, and most citizens have never heard of any Xeno species except in the warning sermons of priests and glorious tales of the Imperium's conquests. In the Gilead system, desperate times led the Veronius dynasty to work with select Xenos like the Aeldery, but this is a dangerous gamble for Lord Veronius in the face of the Imperial Creed. Aeldery sometimes call humans Monarchy as an insult. The Aeldery Ranger. Of all his guests, Galba regards you with the most neutral expression, a clear attempt to hide the twinge of fear he feels every time he looks at you. You are not the first Xenos I have entertained aboard the Herald, but I must admit you have proved more useful than most, Elata. I presume that, despite my best efforts, Veronius has learned of the service you did for me. Elata recalls the time he was hired to watch over a deal being carried out by Captain Galba's seneschal, Elin Korsakov, on the agri world of Ostia. While the human clearly thought the idea of hiring Elata was his own, in truth the Ranger was only using the captain to get close to his true quarry, an Aeldery Corsair who betrayed Elata's craft world of Uelkri. The details of the deal were of no concern to Elata, who begins the flakback perched in a sniper spot high above the exchange, observing with his finely tuned Ranger long rifle. Before shooting, he will have to confirm that the sellers are who he suspects them to be. Have Elata make a DN3 stealth, AG, test to see how good his hiding spot is. If Elata succeeds, he is well hidden from sight. If he fails, the group on the other side of the deal have clearly clocked him. They proceed with the deal, but maneuver themselves behind some crates so Elata doesn't have a clean shot, imposing a +1 DN penalty on all other tests in this flashback. Seneschal Elin Korsakov approaches the meet, cutting an impressive figure in her long grey coat. Elata needs to make a DN3 awareness, int, test to spot the fusion pistol in one seller's gloved hand. If Elata succeeds, he snipes the enemy before they can shoot Elin. If he fails, the enemy moves with disturbing grace and speed and successfully fires the fusion pistol, melting Elin's right arm completely. As both sides draw weapons, the long cloaks fall away, revealing the sellers to be just who Elata suspects. Amongst them is Samuel Twice-Scorned, the Corsair captain who years ago abandoned Elata and their kin on a hostile planet. Priority target. Elata, you are here for Samuel, but it is clear that without your assistance the humans are doomed. What do you prioritize, taking Samuel, or laying down covering fire to protect Elin and her people? If Elata saves Elin, she expresses her deepest gratitude and comments that she will recommend Elata's services to her captain. If she was shot, her arm is completely lost and she is severely wounded, but sputteringly thanks Elata for their aid, hoping that any future endeavors will be more successful. If Elata prioritizes killing Samuel, he manages to wound him perhaps mortally before he is dragged away by his comrades. All of the humans save Elin herself are slain during the exchange. While Elin recommends Elata to Veronius either way, she harbors a deep grudge against the Ranger, whom she suspects could have saved her companions if he wished to. Either way, it is imperative to the craft world that Elata learns how much contact Veronius has had with the Corsairs, and the exact details of any alliance they may have struck. Working for him as an agent is doubtless the best way to achieve this. Noble Company. When all the PCs have been introduced, Captain Galba gives the order for the banquet to begin. While it is clear that great effort has been taken to create an impressive spread, the results are somewhat questionable. Many dishes are simply corpse starch or other synthetic foods drenched in overpowering spices. Others are exotic dishes with ingredients chosen for their rarity rather than any culinary merit, stringy meat from the fearsome megafauna of Nethrius, or borderline rancid caviar from the blessed seas of Enoch. The finest aspect of the meal is undoubtedly the handful of fresh fruit and vegetables taken from the ship's hydroponic farms, but these are almost entirely ignored by the noble company, who instead choose to dine on the more exotic dishes and spend quite a bit of time discussing the supposed merits of the awful fare. Still, it quickly becomes apparent to the agents that these are powerful people. They could be useful allies or dangerous enemies. Over dinner, the agents have the chance to learn more about them and the Gilead system. Gossipmongers. If the agents make a skill test against the DN listed or beat the opposed test noted beside an NPC or subject, they learn the information in that paragraph. If they roll really well and get more exalted icons than they need, they can shift an icon, see further rules on page 21, to learn the information listed as secret. This information can come from reading behavior, remembering rumors, or from indirect clues. For instance, Manley may talk loudly about the irritations of trying to obtain rare artifacts, or Alouette de Mornay might whisper salacious rumors about a hidden heir to the Varonius dynasty. Lord Radovar Manley. Radovar Manley is a rarity indeed, a former officer of the Astra Militarum who survived long enough to retire. Manley held a position of senior military authority on an imperial world during an Ealdari invasion, and quickly rose to prominence during the ensuing punitive campaign undertaken to rout the Xenos from the system. This success would ultimately lead to his ennoblement, though Manley's dissatisfaction with civilian leadership would see him depart with the Varonius flotilla when the rogue trader passed through the system. Table talk. At one point, he rudely asks Elata whether it's true that his people put their souls into rocks. If Elata takes offense, Captain Galba attempts to smooth things over quickly. Radovar carries a strange Xenos firearm that Elata recognizes as a shuriken pistol, but it is poorly maintained and clearly only there to show that he can flaunt such an artifact without fear. Later in the meal, Radovar offers Captain Galba an apology for the absence of his steward, Johann Astorf, who was to assist in the banquet's preparations. Astorf is feeling a little unwell and is currently visiting the spa in the hope that the cleansing waters of the shrine world will soothe his ailment before they reach the flotilla. Galba takes the opportunity to espouse his appreciation for the spa waters and their curative properties. Gossip and secrets. Gossip, DN3 Persuasion, Fel, Test. An agent that passes this test finds out about Manley's history, and that despite his noble's appearance, he remains a fearsome fighter, retaking the last gun accuracy and maintenance exams each solar year, just as any officer of his old regiment would have done. Secret, though he may endure the presence of tame Xenos, such as Elata, Lord Manley despises the Ealdari as a whole. This is hardly rare in the Imperium. However, Manley's hatred has led to a sort of twisted obsession with the Ealdari, and especially their technology. The weapon on his hip is just one example. It is whispered that he hoards far more exotic examples of Xenos technology. Alouette de Mornay. Alouette de Mornay is preacher of the Ministorum, dedicated to espousing the truth of the Imperial Creed and the everlasting glory of the Emperor of Mankind. While others travel the Imperium spreading this truth, Alouette's faith takes another form. While she is quite capable of giving a fiery speech, her true gift lies in song, something only improved by the array of carefully curated vox implants that adorn her. She is a singer in the Perpetual Opera, a temple theatre aboard the Herald which has been the site of endless veneration of the Emperor for 462 years and counting. Alouette speaks quietly at all times, to preserve her voice for just this purpose. She leaves before the meal ends, called back to her place in the opera. Table talk. Alouette is gifted with a striking face and an air of carefully studied elegance. She is a particular favorite of Jackal Varonius, something she cannot but help mentioning. Indeed, she is en route to perform for select members of the Varonius dynasty on board Jackal Varonius's flagship, the Ducal Circlet. Gossip and secrets. Gossip, DN4 Persuasion, Fel, Test. Alouette's service in the Perpetual Opera was set to end several years ago, seeing her assigned to the spiritual needs of an Astra Militarum regiment, much to her dismay. Only Jackal Varonius's intervention prevented this. Secret, Alouette is secretly running messages for a conspiracy who are trying to legitimize a hidden heir to the Veronius dynasty, organized by Deacon Erizik Tundar. If Lachlan learns of this, she will also notice that the vagaries of succession mean her death might serve Alouette's plan. Tests in detail. Opposed tests. When two characters try to perform actions that directly oppose each other in a way that can't be resolved by DN or defense, they make an opposed test. Both characters roll their respective pools at the same time, usually without a Wrath die, and whoever has the most icons wins. Anything that would raise the DN for one character instead gives that number of bonus dice to the opposing character. On a tie, the character who initiated the opposed test wins. Shifting. A 6 on any die is called an exalted icon, meaning that it is worth 2 icons and can be removed from the pool to trigger an additional effect. If you roll enough icons on a test to equal the DN and still have an exalted icon left over, you can shift that exalted icon by removing it from the results and using it for one of these effects. Learn one piece of information per exalted icon shifted. Either the player can ask the GM a question, or the GM tells the player one piece of information they would otherwise struggle to learn. Make a success on a test exceptional, gaining some additional advantage from it, which the player and GM work together to determine. Reduce the time the test takes, either by half or by a suitable amount the GM decides. As part of an attack, add +1 extra damage dice, ED, per exalted icon shifted, see page 7. Add 1 point of glory to the group's glory pool, see page 21, once per test. Captain Galba. Born to a long-standing military family, Marcellin Galba was destined for a role in the Navies Imperialis before he was even born. By the storied standards of his ancestors, however, his career has been lackluster at best. He was ultimately assigned to serve with the rogue traders flotilla to avoid losing a more exemplary officer, though Galbin was told and believes the assignment to be a rare honor. Despite having a relatively poor understanding of his crew's strengths and weaknesses, Galba has made a point of studying every available detail about his ship. He talks about the Herald incessantly, and is quick to praise the many attributes of the void ship which he considers of note. However, he does have a habit of getting the details wrong. The ship varies in length by as much as a kilometer between each grandiose story. Table talk. Captain Galba enjoys talking about the Herald, and especially the Sanctified Spa, where the blessed waters from St. Bertal's shrine on Enoch are used in cleansing pools. He proudly praises their purifying and restorative benefits to any who will listen. Gossip and secrets. Gossip, DN for persuasion, fell. Test. While he comes from a storied military family, Galba himself is a lackluster leader. Previously assigned a backwater posting, he would likely have served his entire life without incident, but Gilead is anything but quiet. While he has yet to oversee, or indeed cause, any true disasters, most consider it to be only a matter of time. Secret, Galba's poor oversight has led to a lack of discipline on the ship. It is common knowledge that petty theft is rife, and months have passed since a proper inventory of the lower decks has been taken. This caused a riot recently, though it was suppressed through the deft intervention of Morstan Fife. Morstan Fife. Voidmaster Morstan Fife leads the armsmen aboard the Herald, and is tasked with overseeing the physical security of crew and guests aboard the ship. He only takes his seat halfway through the meal after carefully inspecting the security arrangements. Once satisfied, Fife's demeanor relaxes somewhat. He does not appear to be expecting trouble, though he keeps his power axe close at all times, ready to protect his captain. He is a stocky man in his late 40s with sandy, close-cropped hair. Table talk. Morstan interrupts Galba occasionally with various administrative updates, which seems to annoy the captain. Some seem quite serious, a brawl in the lower decks resulting in a death, the discovery of an illic distillery, and so on, but Galba consistently waves him away. If questioned, the Voidmaster will stand up for his captain, but will quietly suggest to the agents that they see him later. Ensure that Morstan is introduced to the agents in this scene, as he will have a prominent role in the next. Gossip and secrets. Gossip, DN2 persuasion, fell. Test. It does not take much to get Morstan Fife talking about the bilge, a deck aboard the Herald which has been locked off for years due to various technical malfunctions. Fife wants the deck turned over to him as a training ground for the armsmen, certain its hazardous environment is just what the troops need to hone their skills. Secret, Morstan is just what he seems a loyal if often slightly frustrated servant of the Imperium. Most simply think of him as boring. Other guests and topics. There are other guests present at the meal, including naval officers, representatives of various imperial organizations, representatives of local planetary governments, and others who have business on the flotilla. Most will converse with the agents if approached, mainly to discover who they are and what Varonius might want with them. They keep the topics of conversation as neutral as possible, typically discussing the Herald Varonius or the flotilla as a whole, details of which can be found below. The Herald Varonius. A sword-class escort ship primarily used as a messenger vessel, VIP transport, and long-range scout, the Herald is one of the finest ships in the Varonius flotilla. It caters to those who have such obscene wealth and power that they cannot imagine the grim lives the majority lead in the Imperium. Sword-class ships are notoriously tough, and the Herald Varonius embodies this reputation more than most. Shipwrights have carefully retrofitted the vessel with enhanced void shields and engines at the cost of reduced armaments. The Herald is not used for frontline engagements, but is instead built for speed and durability above all else, designed to break through blockades, survive bombardments, escape engagements, and otherwise reach its destination intact. Primary facilities, the bridge, the weapon batteries, primarily vast laser arrays crackling with energy, the armory, 3 banquet halls, guest quarters, crew quarters, an arena, an opera house with customized servitors, a hydroponics garden for relaxation and a backup food supply, the grand library, a spa with waters from a shrine world, the Gellar field sanctum, the void shields, the engine rooms. The Varonius flotilla. Led by Jackal Varonius's flagship, the Ducal Circlet, the Varonius flotilla is the most powerful fleet in the Gilead system. It came through the Great Rift in Gilead's hour of need and, despite the misgivings of many in the system, Varonius has gathered many allies under his fleet, often reaching out to those the Imperium considers undesirable. Governed by Jackal Varonius and the Circlet Council, the flotilla is a hotbed of power-hungry captains vying for the dynasty's favor. It plays host to many different ships, including a hydroponic agri-ship, an Astra Militarum troop transport, and even a strike cruiser of the Adeptus Astartes. Examples include Juliana's Homecoming, a Piety-class cruiser of the Adeptus Auroritas, captained by Sister Superior Jessiel Thorne. The Blephroscourge, an Adeptus Mechanicus Manufactorum ship overseen by Gener Paravex. The Prerogative, where rumors place the hidden heir to the Varonius dynasty, is captained by Ministorum Deacon Erizik Tundar. You can find more information on the flotilla in the setting guide, including secrets to drop in here. Heresy on the Herald. While the agents enjoy their meal, other forces are at work aboard the Herald. The lax oversight of Captain Galba has allowed a chaos cult to infiltrate the ship and infect the ship with a techno-organic disease known as Gellarpox. The infection is in the very early stages, and the ship may yet be saved. However, the cult are unwilling to wait any longer, and have decided to take matters into their own hands. They intend to drag the ship into the warp, offering it up to the ruinous powers as a gift that they foolishly believe will bring about their own coveted ascension to demonhood. The Festering Abundance. The Festering Abundance is a chaos cult that worships Fausta Aeon, a banned deity peculiar to the Gilead system. In truth, Fausta Aeons is Nurgle by another name, the chaos god of plague, disease, and entropy. The cult has been slowly building up its influence on board the Herald. Its initial goal was to infect the ship's Gellar field generator with Gellarpox, a horrific disease that affects flesh and steel alike. The generator is already infected, and the cult had intended to retreat and allow Gellarpox to spread throughout the flotilla. Fortunately for the Imperium, the cult is impatient and unwilling to wait, especially its senior member, Sullius the Drowned. They have decided to speed things along, fully against the wishes of those with an understanding of the grander strategy at play. Thaddeus. Thaddeus is the menial whom Traitor spotted attending the machines near the Gellar field generator. It is he who infected the machines, using stolen Adeptus Mechanicus unguents corrupted by dark rituals to Nurgle. Thaddeus does not fully understand the implications of his actions. He knows nothing of the warp, and very little of mutants or demons, though he has been told that Fausta will send his servants to help the cult in its moment of glory. Thaddeus's fall from the Emperor's light began many years ago, when he was offered up to the Imperial Navy as part of his homeworld's tithe. Over long years of hard labor, all of those who were press-ganged with him perished, and with each death Thaddeus' hatred grew. When the flotilla arrived in Gilead, cultists of the festering abundance found Thaddeus and recruited him, and he was only too willing to serve. Thaddeus has been spreading the oil throughout the ship's Gellar field Sanctum, signing the laborer's lament, page 28, as he goes. A musical refrain from his homeworld, the lament recurs throughout the adventure, as Thaddeus's incessant singing and the Gellarpox infection have imbued the song into the now rotting machinery. Sullius the Drowned. Incompetence and corruption amongst the herald's officers has resulted in a prolonged shortage of food for menial laborers, triggering in a mutinous uprising some months ago that threatened Captain Galba himself. Were it not for Voidmaster Fife, the captain would certainly be dead. The riots were eventually suppressed, and Galba neglected to report their true extent. Though a rather minor figure in the revolt, a menial named Sullius was chosen to be made an example of. He was dumped into the bilge, an ancient and barricaded deck long ago abandoned due to leaks of radiation and toxic materials. Perhaps purely to tickle the twisted humor of the plague god, Sullius miraculously survived. There, among the rotten toxic fumes, Sullius found a shrine to Fausta. Throwing himself on the god's mercy, he learned many dark secrets, and is now a rogue psyker of some power. Sullius refers to this event as his drowning, and it eventually led him to a position of influence within the festering abundance. Though pleased to have infected the ship with Gellarpox, Sullius is the main force behind taking immediate action, as he simply cannot wait to have his vengeance upon Galba. Greater glories. Not satisfied to simply have spread the Gellarpox to the herald, the cult has a new goal. Sullius became aware of certain passages of a heretical book, Invocations of the Emperor Indignant, which can be used in a powerful and blasphemous ritual capable of summoning a brief but massive warp storm large enough to fling the herald into the demonic immaterium. Though none understand the full details, the cult believe the ritual will bring the void ship into the presence of Fausta, who will surely accept it as an offering and bestow some kind of gift on his devoted servants. The cult has at last gathered the materials for the ritual, and have managed to ensure that Invocations was purchased for the ship's library. See Somnus's flashback on page 6, the pieces are in place, and the cult is at last ready to act. Though this action will accelerate the progression of the Gellarpox infection, it will also make it impossible for the disease to subtly infect the rest of the flotilla. This will be cold comfort to the crew, however, as they will certainly perish if something isn't done immediately. Uninvited guests. A terrifying lurch shudders through the ship, and the lights flicker and dim. Alarm bells ring out and everyone feels the sickening sensation of a transition into the warp. Where once the screen showed the stars of real space, they now display scrolling text of imperial hymns and maxims. Over the ship's internal Vox system, the voice of a panicked officer can suddenly be heard, Captain Galba. Sir, we've undergone an unscheduled warp translation. The navigator is screaming, sir, and the astropath has gone catatonic. We don't know. Galba's face goes pale, and he has just a moment to murmur, "May the Emperor protect us," before the entire banquet hall suddenly inverts. Gravity sends everyone present falling upwards towards the roof. The agents must all make DN3 athletics, strength, tests to avoid falling hard onto the ceiling. Anyone who fails the test falls prone and takes 1d3 plus 1 damage, see damage, page 22, ignoring armor. Any agent who succeeds on the athletics test can draw a weapon if they wish. Read the following text aloud. Before you have a chance to recover, reality seems to tear itself open in front of you. Through a horrific rent in real space, a twisting landscape of fetid trees and green-brown skies is momentarily visible. Before you can react, Morstan Fife, who landed on his feet with athletic confidence, throws himself between the breach in reality and Captain Galba. He seems about to 20 scream a warning, or perhaps a prayer, before a gout of horrific sludge erupts from the rift. Fife takes the worst of it, saving his captain in the process, before collapsing in a sopping, writhing, malodorous mess. Ask the agents what they do, and give each a moment to decide. Perhaps they gather their weapons, see to the injured, or attend to the unfortunate form of Morstan. After a moment, the figure that was once Morstan Fife begins to stir. The Gellar field is meant to protect a ship in the warp, but due to its nascent infection, it is not functioning as it should. As a result, a minor warp breach momentarily opened into the great banquet hall. The gout of disgusting fluids was a stream of pure corruption, and it has already begun to work its foul influence on the once proud Morstan Fife. With a gurgling cry, he leaps from the ground and launches himself at the agents, striking at whoever is closest, including any who came to his aid. Before the agents can enter combat, they must all make a DN3 fear test due to the mutant Morstan's frightful form battle cry. Battle cries activate either at the start of a combat or when the threat takes its first turn. You will need the possessed mortal threat profile, see page 46, for this fight. If the agents prove unable to deal with Morstan, then Lord Radovar Meldrake will step in to assist them. He will empty the Aeldery pistol on his belt into the creature, killing Morstan and destroying the pistol. An annoyance Meldrake is certain to blame the agents for. Expanded rules. With combat joined, there are some important rules to introduce. Wrath and Glory features fast-paced combat emphasizing storytelling over mechanics, so these shouldn't be overwhelming, but you may want to bookmark this section so you can reference it later. The Wrath die. One die in every test should be designated the Wrath die, which should be a different color to the rest. The Wrath die can produce icons and exalted icons just like all other dice, but a result of 1 or 6 on the Wrath die has an additional dramatic effect. When the Wrath die lands on a 1, that triggers a complication on the test. This is a narrative prompt for the player or the GM to add something to the scene, not necessarily a negative, but something unexpected and dramatic. A test with a complication can still succeed, but might indicate a partial success with a problematic addition. If the Wrath die lands on a 6, that counts as an exalted icon as normal, and the group gains +1 point of glory. If this happens on an attack test, it's a critical hit. See page 23 for more information on critical hits. Wrath points. Agents start every session with 2 Wrath points, or 3 if they have the Touched by Fate talent. The GM can award Wrath points for good roleplay or a really awesome moment. Every agent also has an objective for the adventure that immediately earns them a Wrath point when they achieve it. Players can spend a Wrath point to re-roll all dice showing a 1, 2, or 3 on a single test, except a Wrath die that rolled a 1. Add a minor narrative element in the current scene, collaborating with the GM to make sure it fits. Take an action to recover shock equal to rank plus tier, as long as they are still conscious. The Glory Pool. Glory is a shared pool of points that all players can contribute to and spend. The Glory Pool starts each session empty and can only ever contain a maximum glory of 6. Players add 1 glory to the pool whenever they roll a 6 on the Wrath die, and they can choose to shift an exalted icon to add 1 glory to the pool. Glory is a shared pool, so make sure all the players agree before spending it. The effects of glory are as follows. You may spend any number of points of glory before you make a test to add an equal number of dice to the dice pool. You may spend any number of points of glory after making a successful attack to add an equal amount of damage. You may spend a point of glory to improve the effect of a critical hit, see page 23. You may spend a point of glory to seize the initiative during combat, see page 22. Fear tests. When they witness unnatural horrors, agents must make a fear test using their resolve against a DN dictated by the source of the fear. If they succeed, they may act normally. If they fail, they gain the fear condition, meaning that all tests they make are at +2 DN until the end of the scene or until an ally passes a leadership, will, test of DN2 plus the source's fear value. Sister Honoria has a resolve of 3, and makes her resolve test with the following results, 2, 5, and 6. The 6 counts as 2 icons and the 5 counts as 1, so she meets the DN of 3, and so stands resolute in the face of the ruinous powers. Unfortunately, Lachlan only has a resolve of 1, and makes her resolve test rolling only for a single icon, less than the DN of 3. Lachlan suffers the fear condition, meaning they make all tests with a +2 DN penalty during the scene. Honoria notices Lachlan's fear, and makes a DN5 leadership, will, test, rolling 4 dice with the following results, 4, 5, 5, 6. That makes 5 icons, matching the DN of 5. She urges Lachlan to stay strong and remember her duty to the Emperor, removing the fear condition. Combat rules. Damage. When a character is attacked or at risk of harm, subtract the damage they would take from their resilience. If there is any remaining damage, the character suffers that many wounds. If a source of damage ignores armor, use the character's base resilience instead of their total resilience. If a weapon has armor piercing, AP, subtract the AP from the armor when making a damage calculation. So, if a weapon has AP 2, it ignores 2 points of armor. Example, Lachlan failed her agility test to land gracefully when she fell towards the ceiling. The GM rolls 1d3 plus 1 for falling damage. A d3 can be rolled by taking a 6-sided die and dividing the result by 2, rounding up. The GM rolled a 5, meaning Lachlan taking 4 points of damage. Lachlan has a total resilience of 7, but falling damage ignores armor, so she reduces the 4 points of damage by her base resilience of 3. Lachlan takes the remaining 1 point of damage as a wound. Wounded and dying. A character who has suffered any wounds has the wounded condition, meaning they make all tests with a +1 DN penalty. When a character takes more wounds than their maximum wounds, they are dying, unable to act and barely clinging to life. They immediately fall prone and remain so as long as they are dying. If a character suffers further damage that would cause them to take a wound while dying, they take a traumatic injury instead. If a character suffers more traumatic injuries than their tier +1, so 3 for this adventure, they die. If the character's wounds are restored, i.e. from a medkit or a regroup, they are no longer dying. Determination. Agents can use an ability called Determination to shrug off some damage. Whenever an agent would take a wound, they can choose to roll a dice pool equal to their determination to try and convert that wound into shock. Every icon the agent rolls on their determination test converts 1 wound into 1 shock. Shock starts at 0 for every agent. An agent who takes more shock than their maximum shock gains the exhausted condition until they recover. Example, Lachlan rolls her determination to try and take that 1 wound as shock. She rolls her pool of 2 determination and she gets a 2 and a 4, which provides the 1 icon she needed to turn her wound into shock. If she takes for more shock, she will be exhausted. Initiative. In combat, the players choose one agent to act first. When that agent has taken their turn, the GM chooses a threat or NPC to take their turn next. Then the players choose a different agent to take their turn, pass the action back to the GM, and so on. Once everyone in the scene has acted, a new round begins with one of the agents again. When an agent has finished their turn, another player can spend 1 glory to seize the initiative and act next. After a threat acts, the GM can spend 1 ruin to seize the initiative and have another threat act next. Actions. Each agent can make one of each kind of action in a round. Combat action. A task requiring most of the character's focus, such as attacking or performing most actions that require a skill test. Simple action. A task requiring some attention but not full focus, such as reloading or using the awareness, int, skill to learn more about the situation. Reflexive action. An instinctive task that a character can make outside of their turn, such as defending themselves using a talent. Movement. An character moves their speed in meters or navigates a challenging obstacle. Free action. A task that requires little effort, such as opening an unlocked door or shouting a warning. Example. The players decide that Sister Honoria should act first so she can use her leadership as a simple action to bring Somnus out of their state of terror. See fear tests on page 21. Honoria can also take a movement action to walk her speed in meters towards the possessed Morstan Fife, and a combat action to shoot at him with her bolt pistol. Attacking. Attack tests work similarly to skill tests. The character uses their ballistic skill, A, if they are using a ranged weapon, or their weapon skill, I, if they are fighting in melee. The DN for an attack is the target character's defense. The attack hits if the number of icons rolled in the attack test meets or exceeds the target's defense. The amount of damage dealt by a weapon is shown in its profile. Ranged weapons deal the damage shown in their profile, plus ED, extra damage dice. Roll a number of dice equal to the weapon's ED, then add the number of icons for the total damage of the attack. Then, reduce the total damage by the target's resilience. The target suffers wounds equal to the remaining damage. Melee weapons use the same process, but also add the attacker's strength as damage, already included on the agent's character sheet and in threat profiles. Critical hits. If an agent makes a successful attack test with a 6 on the Wrath die, they inflict a critical hit in addition to adding 1 glory to the pool. If the attack misses, the critical hit is not triggered, but if the attack hits and the damage does not exceed the target's resilience, the critical hit still has its full effect. The Wrath and Glory rulebook has a critical hit table to roll on, but for this adventure we recommend choosing an option from the simplified critical hit table below. Each critical hit also has an option for a greater effect if the group choose to spend 1 glory to activate it. Threats and Determination. Only some threats can use Determination, as listed on their threat profile under the Determination section, and it usually requires the GM to spend a point of ruin. Example: Sister Honoria shoots at Morstan, the possessed mortal. The target's defense is 3, so her ballistic skill, A, pool of 6 has to roll 3 icons or more. She succeeds, rolling a 2, 2, 4, 4, 4, and a 6. On top of the 3 icons needed to hit, she has an exalted icon, which could convert into a point of glory, or add +1 ED to her attack. She chooses to add to her damage. Honoria's bolt pistol does 10 damage +1 ED, but because she shifted an exalted icon to give herself additional ED, she rolls 2 dice for her ED. She gets a 3 and a 5 for 1 icon, which adds +1 to her pistol's damage. A total of 11 damage on the possessed mortal. Morstan's resilience is 8. If an agent's attack was armor-piercing, AP, it would ignore a number of points of resilience equal to the AP rating of the weapon, to a maximum of the target's AR. In this case, Honoria's bolt pistol has no AP but does a lot of damage. Subtract the possessed mortal's resilience of 8 from the damage total. That leaves 3 wounds for it to take, halfway to its maximum wounds of 6. Threat attacks work the same way. A threat's most important dice pools are listed on their threat profile, with D a default dice pool for any other test. Critical hit table. 1. Disarmed. Whether this is the loss of a weapon or the removal of a limb, the character must spend a simple action retrieving, regrowing, or replacing their weapon. If they cannot replace or retrieve the weapon, they are unable to use that form of attack until they can replace it. Glory. The target also takes take 1 wound. 2. Visceral. The attack causes 1d6 additional damage. Glory. The target's resilience is also reduced by 1 for the rest of the scene. 3. Chain reaction. The attack causes 1d3 additional wounds. Glory. Another target within range also takes 1d3 additional wounds. 4. Bleeding. The target takes -1 resilience until the end of their next turn. Glory. The -1 to resilience lasts until the end of the scene. 5. Parry. The attacker gains +1 defense until the end of their next turn. Glory. This defense bonus applies to an additional character of the attacker's choice. 6. Weak point. The target takes -1 defense until the end of their next turn. Glory. The -1 to defense lasts until the end of the scene. Violet alert. With Morstan defeated, Captain Galba emerges from behind the chandelier and calms his guests, then waves over the agents. He is terrified, and his instinct is to start ordering people about until the issue is resolved. Galba says, "You there? You are handpicked agents of Veronius, no? Sort this out. Morstan is not currently available, so the duty falls to you." The agents will no doubt have questions, but Captain Galba is basically useless and simply repeats that someone has to deal with this mess. Most citizens of the Imperium know nothing of the warp, diamonds, or the exact cause of mutation, and will be of little help. Others may provide better suggestions, and the agents may attempt appropriate tests to find out more. Lord Radovar Meldrake. Meldrake has seen a lot of things in his time, and is privy to some facts kept from the general populace of the Imperium. He does not know what the warp is in any detail, but does know that it is a realm of danger and corruption, and that warp travel is a necessary evil used to connect the Emperor's vast realm. He also knows that the Gellar field is meant to keep the warp at bay, and it is not hard to deduce that something might be wrong with it if otherwise upstanding void masters are erupting into tentacles and teeth in the middle of a banquet hall. He will inform the agents of this if he thinks they are willing to address the situation. Lieutenant Kalassa. The voice on the Vox earlier was Lieutenant Kalassa, a competent if inexperienced flight officer. If the agents think to use the Vox, they can contact Kalassa, who can confirm the following. The ship is indeed currently in the warp. The Gellar field is fluctuating and is essential to everyone on the ship retaining their life and sanity. The navigator and astropath, two essential psychers tolerated on Imperial ships, are alive but unresponsive after experiencing some sort of mental shock. There are voices on the Vox that Kalassa doesn't recognize, but which are screeching praise to something called Faustaean. Once the agents have received this information, the line becomes difficult to understand. Amidst the static, the laborer's lament can be heard, see page 28. Prior knowledge. Information on the warp, diamonds, and even mutants is tightly controlled, so the agents may not understand what they have just witnessed, or exactly how bad the situation is. Agents who wish to know more about what is going on can make the following tests. On the warp. Agents that pass a DN3 Scholar, int, test know that void ships travel through the warp to move vast distances quickly, and that the process can be incredibly dangerous. If Honoria or Marius pass or another agent shifts, they also know that the warp can corrupt souls and cause mutation, and dangerous entities dwell there. Neither Somnus nor Elata need to make a test, as their training and background respectively mean they know all of the above, and that the powers of psychers come from the warp. On Gellar fields. Agents that pass a DN3 Tech, int, test know that functional Gellar fields are essential to safeguarding a void ship from the warp. Traitor gains +3 bonus dice to this test as a member of the Adeptus Mechanicus. If an agent shifts, they learn that damaged Gellar fields might periodically allow dangerous events to happen, and will eventually shut down unless their machine spirit can be appeased in a respectful manner. Taking action. Galba will recover his senses long enough to ensure the agents all have Vox speeds to communicate with one another before they leave. This is also to ensure that he can keep tabs on their progress and issue them further orders. Should the agents decide to stay put, conditions on the ship will deteriorate quickly. Reports on the Vox talk about monstrosities in the hallways, and odd events both in the library and near the Gellar field sanctum. The banquet hall is attacked again, this time by assorted threats of your choice from pages 46-48. It should become clear that staying still means certain death. If the agents still don't get the message, Lord Meldrake will eventually take matters into his own hands, and order them to accompany him into the bowels of the ship or be executed. He is quite serious, and will shoot at least one of the agents to make his point. One last thing. Lord Meldrake catches Lachlan's eye before the agents leave and nods to a corner of the room where they can talk privately. If Lachlan is not present, Lord Meldrake will consider Traitor or Somnus for this task, especially if either of the agents has already spoken with him. My steward, Jurhan, is also aboard this forsaken vessel. He has a case with a cargo of some personal value to me. I will reward you handsomely if you bring me that case, and I would be quite happy if my steward survived too, I suppose. What say you? If the agent accepts, Meldrake hands over a data slate key to a tracking device in the case. It points to the prestige arena beyond the Masharian banquet hall. Before the agents depart, the Vox on the ruined remains of Fife spelt crackles. On the other end is Emsley Bardot. She and her team of armsmen are pinned down in the Masharian banquet hall, desperate for help. The Masharian banquet hall is close, and Galba says their route should pass through it in any case. As the agents plunge into the depths of the Herald Veronius, they hear the sound of the great banquet hall's double doors closing behind them, followed by the screech of tables being dragged to bar re-entry. Captain Galba has recovered sufficiently to become concerned over his own safety, and the agents will not be able to return without an incredible explanation. The Gellar field. Though the agents likely know little of the specifics of the Gellar field, by this point in the adventure they should have figured out it is essential to the safety of the Herald. To travel the incalculable vastness of the galaxy with relative speed, void ships of the Imperium use dangerous warp travel. Ancient engines utilizing long-lost technology allow a vessel to slip briefly into the demon-infested dimension, shielded from its chaotic corruption by the esoteric technology of the Gellar field, which cloaks the ship in a bubble of real space. Whilst in the warp, a void ship is guided by a psyker known as a navigator, then if all goes well it re-emerges into real space at its destination. When the Herald was unexpectedly plunged into the warp, an emergency activation of the Gellar field was triggered to preserve the vessel and its occupants. This is no small feat, almost killing the navigator and leeching power from many decks, but it saved the lives of everyone aboard for now. The damaging shift into the immaterium is causing the Gellar field to fluctuate, allowing the insidious influence of the warp to seep into the ship and its crew. The agents must repair the Gellar field generator at the ship's stern to safely stem the tide of chaos until the navigator can guide them back to real space. What happens next? There are a limited number of routes to the Gellar field sanctum, with a few branching paths to choose from. Though the void ship is a labyrinth of twisting corridors and access tunnels, most paths converge on a few key locations for reasons of logistics and engineering. The diagram to the right shows how agents can traverse the Herald Veronius to reach the Gellar field sanctum. What's really going on? The Festing Abundance, a cult of the chaos god Nurgle, has been infiltrating the crew for months, intent on spreading Gellarpox to the ship. In this they have already succeeded, and already a malignant disease of flesh and steel has begun to fester thanks to the efforts of Thaddeus, Tullius the Drowned, page 19, and the rest of the cult. Not satisfied, more ambitious members of the cult have used the ritual in the book acquired from the estate of Lady Maldonado, see Somnus Vinet on pages 6-7, to summon a warp storm which has flung the Herald into the immaterium. As the infected Gellar field grows weaker, demonic infestation spreads through the ship. The Festering Abundance plan to offer the ship to Fausta Aeon, their title for the chaos god Nurgle, as a gift. Unfortunately for them, this offering is beneath the mighty father of plagues, and the diamonds that have been drawn to the ship are anything but impressed by the cult, who would have better served their master by allowing the Gellarpox to spread unnoticed. What's in a name? Just as the cultists refer to Nurgle as Fausta Aeon, neither will most of the agents have any clue about the true name of a ruinous power. Agents may attempt a DN8 scholar, int, test to recall tales of a ruinous power associated with disease. Hunaria and Marius have +3 bonus dice in this test, due to their backgrounds, but otherwise Nurgle is a name known only to a senior military and religious leaders of the Imperium. Pursuing further knowledge of Fausta Aeon and his true name could be interesting material for a future adventure involving these agents, and may well bring them to the attention of powerful people, including the dreaded Inquisition itself. Crossfire. The passageway towards the Masharian banquet hall is illuminated by the sickly glow of emergency lumen lights that flicker periodically, creating shifting shadows on the esoteric machinery lining the corridors. At first, the only sounds are the agent's footsteps and the low subsonic thrumming of the void ship, but as they progress the vessel's vox system sputter into a droning static that slowly morphs into distorted music. Turning a corner towards the Masharian banquet hall, the agents encounter signs of conflict, fresh scorch marks of lasgun beams and bloody smears along the floor and walls. Ask the agents if they would like to proceed stealthily. If so, they must all make a DN3 Stealth A test. If they all succeed, they enter the banquet hall unnoticed and ambush the enemy, meaning the threats don't get to take a turn in the first round of combat unless they spend a point of ruin to seize the initiative. However, the agents enter, read or paraphrase the following: the furniture of the Masharian banquet hall has been gathered into a makeshift barricade, behind which Emsley Bardot tries to calm her cadre of armsmen as they fire in fear, wasting their ammo. Their targets at first glance look like menial crew, but their uniforms are tattered, showing pulsating boils that surge from their rotting skin. One of the mutated crew members freezes in place, pus dripping from their ears and eyes as their form begins to swell. Coruscating light and acidic discharge burst from their boils as tentacles and horns sprout from their body. The mutants are a handful of crew members corrupted by the festering abundance. They have pledged themselves to the plague god, who transformed them into more pleasing physical forms. If the agents do not intervene, Lieutenant Bardot and her armsmen will die horribly. There is a single possessed mortal, page 46, and a group of 6 chaos cultists, page 48, which you might like to deal with as a mob, page 29. After dispatching these threats, the agents may take a regroup, page 39. The armsmen continue to panic even after being saved, though a DN3 leadership test will calm them. Additionally, if Lieutenant Bardot was injured during Honoria's flashback, her wounds have reopened and require a DN3 Medici test to patch up. If the armsmen are calmed and Bardot is healthy, the cadre will reveal they gathered some supplies from both the armory and their fallen comrades, and will share the following with the agents. 1 flak coat, AR3, bloodstained but whole. 2 medikits, a character with a medikit can make a DN3 Medici, test 2. Restore a wound to a character. Every exalted icon shifted restores 1 additional wound. Remove a condition from a character. This is DN1 if the condition is hindered. Restore rank +1 shock, 3 in this adventure, to a character. 1 ammo for every agent. Hands-free lumens that work like torches. A respirator that makes the wearer immune to airborne toxins and poisons for up to 2 hours. 3 doses of stim, a drug that immediately restores 1d3 + 3 shock as part of a Medici, test. Regardless of whether the supplies were shared, Bardot will inform the agents that the crew members who attacked them were impossible to reason with, seemingly driven by a murderous drive. Endless hordes. Before the agents can question Bardot, they hear the sound of cries and shrieks as more cultists swarm down the corridor. A stench seeps into the banquet hall, rotting flesh oddly intermingled with machine oil. An armsman screams and snaps off a burst of last gun fire as horrifying figures emerge from the passageway leading from the food stores. The mass of putrescent cultists seems endless, crawling over one another like a tide of rot, a horde you cannot hope to defeat. Bardot and the armsmen look to you. What do you do? The horde is a confusing mass of mutated flesh, but agents that choose to fight or observe them may make a DN3 awareness, test. Success reveals that some are infested not just with a virulent plague, but also industrial wiring that erupts from their flesh, the remains of tools they were using or augmetics merged with disease. These are Vox Shamblers, page 46, a variety of Gellarpox mutant fused with twisted machinery, in amongst the horde of cultists, page 48. They repeat the laborer's lament, spliced with snippets of machine code that Traitor finds abhorrent. The agents have 2 dilemmas facing them. First, will they stay here and make a hopeless last stand, or head towards the Gellar field Sanctum? Second, will they order Bardot and her cadre to reinforce the great banquet hall, or to accompany them? If the agents stand and fight, 8 cut lists and 4 Vox Shamblers appear at the start of each round. It should quickly become clear they will die here, but you may allow them to flee at any time after they decide whether to send Bardot and the armsmen to protect the great banquet hall or risk taking them deeper into the ship. As the agents leave the Masharian banquet hall, Captain Galba contacts them via Vox Speed, saying, "You're clear of the banquet hall? Good. No, you should continue toward the Gellar field generator in the ship's stern as quickly as possible. From where you are now you can get there either through the Prestige Arena or the Grand Library, as seems best to you." If the agent sent Bardot and her troops back, Galba thanks them for prioritizing the safety of the ship's most vital crew member himself. If the agents have Lord Meldrake's tracker, it directs them to the Prestige Arena, page 34. If Somnus is in the party, inform him that he feels a surge of psychic power coming from the Grand Library, page 30, moving through the ship. The Herald Veronius is vast, a void-born city populated by a veritable army of toiling menials. Traveling through the Herald's interwoven corridors, be they gilded concourses or the stagnant warrens of crew tunnels, can take substantial time, particularly while infested with the worshippers of Faustian. Whenever the agents are traveling from one location to another, you may ask them to make tests to get to where they want to go while avoiding combat with the cult of the festering abundance, for example. Awareness, notice approaching cultists. Cunning, fell, lure some cultists into a trap. Stealth, sneak past patrolling cultists. Survival, will, navigate through the ship. Tech, tap into a cogitator for a local map. If the agent suggests a particularly clever plan, you may allow them to succeed without a test. Any encounters should be brief, serving to add excitement to the adventure or unsettle the agents. The Labourer's Lament. This short verse crops up throughout the adventure. Early on, the agents may catch a few broken lines through a crackling Vox speaker. Later, the lyrics are rusted into the walls or present in the discordant hum of cultists. A DN3 scholar, int. Test by any of the Imperium agents means they recognize this as the Labourer's Lament, sung to and by workers to remind them of the sacrifices demanded by the Imperium. Toil in service, workers dear, come ye now to service, know the Emperor is near and always will protect us. Though ye toil for golden throne and sweat and bleed in labour, the Emperor holds tight his own and keeps us in his favour. Ruin. Ruin is a resource the GM can spend to control the narrative and escalate the dangers of the 41 ST millennium. Ruin shouldn't be used to punish the players or try to win, where everyone is at the table to have fun, and the GM is there to help the players to tell a story, not be their enemy. In addition to the ruin uses below, some threats have abilities that are activated by spending ruin listed in their threat profile. The GM can spend 1 ruin to reroll failures, but not complications, on any test for a threat. Seize the initiative once per round. Have an NPC take a turn during an ambush. Restore 1d3+3 of an NPC's shock. Doing so counts as an action for that NPC. Make a determination roll. The GM gains 1 ruin whenever a player fails a corruption test. A player fails a fear test. The GM rolls a 6 on the Wrath die. Perils of the Warp. Rolling a complication on a test to activate a psychic power triggers a Peril of the Warp, a nightmarish manifestation of the Immaterium in real space. If a Psyker triggers Perils of the Warp, roll on the table below. 1 to 2. The Labourer's Lament. The humming background noise of the Labourer's Lament becomes deafening. All characters, including enemies, in the room suffers a +2 DN penalty to all tests until the Psyker's next turn. 3 to 4. Melting World. An Immaterium incursion makes the room melt around the agents. They can only move at half speed for the rest of the scene unless they succeed on a DN3 willpower test. 5-6. False Face. Every ranged attack made until the Psyker's next turn has a chance to hit the wrong target, as all vision is insidiously influenced by the warp. If a ranged attacker rolls a Wrath complication, randomly determine who becomes the target for the attack. Mob Rule. Agents in Wrath and Glory are often severely outnumbered, and it can be difficult to track numerous enemy NPCs. To simplify this, a group of identical troops, such as the 6 cultists in Crossfire, page 27, can be formed into a mob. This approach can effectively communicate the narrative idea of threats working together and cut down the amount of dice rolling and number crunching you'll have to do as the GM. All individuals in a mob move as one and usually attack as one. If all members of a mob attack a single target, they gain bonus dice to the attack equal to half the number of individuals in the mob. So, if the mob of 6 cultists attacked a target in melee, they would roll 5 dice for their weapon skill, plus 3 dice for half the members of the mob. If a mob chooses to split their attacks between 2 targets, decide how many members of the mob are attacking each target and use the same rule. For example, the mob of 6 cultists have 2 targets. 4 of the cultists shoot Honoria, and 2 shoot Somnus. The 4 cultists shooting Honoria roll their ballistic skill pool of 3, and add 2 bonus dice. The 2 cultists shooting Somnus roll their ballistic skill pool of 3, and add 1 bonus die. When an agent attacks a mob, they make an attack test as normal, hoping to meet or exceed the target mob's defense, 2 for the cultists. Additionally, each icon rolled over the mob's defense counts as hitting another individual in the mob, due to them being grouped closely together. Each member of the mob is treated as having 1 wound for simplicity, so as long as the agent deals more damage than the mob's defense, they kill every target they hit. For example, Eleanor shoots at the mob of cultists with his ballistic skill, AG, of 6 and rolls for icons. He's managed to kill 1 cultist by equaling their defense of 2 and then 2 more for the 2 additional icons he rolled over the defense DN of 2. Combat options. The Wrath and Glory rulebook has extensive rules for combat situations. In order to keep this relatively simple for new GMs and players, we have listed a few useful combat actions here. Aim. Ranged. Sacrifice a move action to gain +1 bonus dice on ranged attacks made this turn. All-out attack. Melee. Suffer 2 to defense until the start of your next turn to gain +2 bonus dice to melee attacks for the round. Charge. Melee. Take a full round action to move up to double speed, minimum of 4 meters, and make a melee attack test with +1 bonus die. Cover. Defensive. Characters who are half concealed behind cover get +1 defense, characters who are more than half concealed behind cover get +2 defense. No special action is required to benefit from cover, just moving behind it is sufficient. Fall back. Movement and melee. A character can use a combat action to move at least half their speed and up to their full speed away from an enemy to avoid prompting a reflexive attack. Full auto. Ranged. The character empties their ammo clip and has to reload before the weapon can be used again, but gains bonus dice on the attack equal to the salvo value of the weapon. Multi-action. Any. Perform more than one combat action on a turn. First, declare how many combat actions you are taking. Then, add +2 DN to all tests for every extra combat action. For example, Traitor declares he will shoot a cultist and perform a Medici test on Somnus. The cultist has a defense of 2, and a Medici test is normally DN 3, but as this is a multi-action, the ballistic skill, A, test is made at DN 4 and the Medici test is made at DN 5. If Traitor wanted to shoot twice and make a Medici test, both shots would be DN 6 and the Medici test would be DN 7. Reflexive attack. Melee. Combatants within melee range of one another are considered to be engaged in combat. If an engaged combatant moves away without using fall back, any other combatants may use their reflexive action to make an attack against them, if they haven't already used their reflexive action. The Great Library. You enter a foreboding library with shelves of old wood running along the walls. At a second glance, you realize that the wood grain of the bookcases oozes viscous clear fluid, and the book's leather is cracked and rotten, spilling foul-smelling flakes across the black rockcrete floor. Overhead, the screen that would usually depict a flickering starfield across the ceiling shows a bewildering swirl of colors, shapes, and expansive and unknowable vistas unfit for mortal minds. The warp itself surrounds the void ship. A static murmuring fills the air, and you can hear soft clicking and whirring sounds from something unseen amongst the shelves. If agents spend too long looking at the monitors, have them make a DN3 corruption test even through a screen. The warp is corrupting and malignant, especially as a ritual has drawn the gaze of Nurgle's servants. Ask the agents to make a DN3 awareness, int, test. Anyone that passes hears the gradually growing sound of chanting, and sees small shadows flit between the shelves further into the library. Anyone that fails must make a DN2 fear test, as everyone notices the room's features change. Bookshelves seem to warp and twist into profane shapes, effigies of a laughing, bulbous god bestowing grotesque blessings on his followers. Looming racks of books appear to lean inward far above you, meeting overhead more like the limbs of trees in a festering forest than any proper architecture. As the agents near the source of the chanting, they notice uniformed corpses strewn amongst the bookshelves. All are clearly crew of the Herald, and Somnus will recognize some scribes previously in the company of Artina Caldo. Their entrails have been extracted and arranged into unspeakable words and symbols. Beyond this horrific sight, in the very center of the library, 7 cultists are arrayed around a table. They are sufficiently distracted, so no stealth test is required to approach. Somnus will recognize that Sullius the Drowned, the mysterious figure from the auction, is leading them. Sullius is reading aloud from invocations of the Emperor Indignant, and is frequently racked by violent fits of coughing that expel grey gouts of pus and bile across the table and those around it. Beyond them, the librarian Artina Caldo is shackled to one of the shelves. Voice of Salvation. Captain Galba may contact the agents over Vox during the adventure. Though he isn't terribly helpful in most matters, he has led many boastful tours around the ship and knows its layout well. You should allow the agents to make their own way forward as much as possible, but if they seem truly stuck, confused, or if they choose to contact Galba themselves, he can aid them somewhat. He mostly provides vague encouragement. Have you tried shooting them? Perhaps let them know that Captain Galba orders them to let you pass, but can be helpful with directions if required. The Grand Tour. The agents are encouraged to take a direct and urgent path to the Gellar field generator, meaning they likely will not visit at least 2 locations during the adventure. This is by design. The 41 St. Millennium is hostile and hard choices must be made, with inevitable unwelcome consequences. However, the agents are free to travel back to areas they have bypassed, for example, going to the library after the arena, though this will likely result in injury, corruption, or diminishing their precious ammo supplies. The players should always feel in control of their decisions, though not the outcomes. Chants and Chains. With a DN for Scholar, Int, Test, DN3 for Somnus, the agents can intuit that the ritual is trapping the Herald in the warp, drawing Nurgle's influence into the ship through the unreliable protection of the disrupted Gellar field. Disrupting the ritual will aid the navigator in guiding the Herald back to real space, though this will take time. The cultists are sufficiently distracted, allowing the agents to bypass them completely if they foolishly choose to allow the ritual to continue. Otherwise, they have a few options, listed on this page. If combat erupts, there are 6 cultists, page 48, and Sullius uses the threat profile of an emaciated rogue psyker, page 48. Ambush the cultists. To ambush the cultists, all agents must pass a DN3 Stealth A test. If they succeed, the cultists cannot take their turns in the first round of combat. Rescue the librarian. If an agent passes a DN5 Stealth A test, they can rescue Artina Caldo without alerting the cultists. She is injured, but not fatally, and eager to assist anyone willing to purge those who have profaned her library. She was ambushed herself and knows little about the cult, but will inform the agents that she can order the library's servo skulls to distract the cultists. The servo skulls are made of the remains of former librarians, and are more than willing to help. If the agents agree to this, the servo skulls descend on the cultists, allowing the agents to ambush them without making a test and ensuring all the cultists are hindered. At the start of the 3rd round of combat, Sullius utters a profane invocation that causes the skulls to fall, putrid flesh sprouting from their interior. Confront the cultists. For the festering abundance, this is a moment of great triumph. These are the highest-ranking servants of the cult aboard the ship, and will not be swayed from their course. However, Sullius the Drowned will warmly greet any who announce themselves to him. He will invite the agents, particularly Somnus, to throw off the shackles of the corpse emperor and join us in the comforting embrace of rot and decay. Though unlikely to comply, if Somnus seems to be considering this, it could give the other agents an opportunity to attack unexpectedly. Hunaria and Marius in particular will likely find this entire ritual unendurably abhorrent. Alternatively, the agents may wish to hear Sullius out. He will outline the cult's plan in broad strokes, as he simply cannot conceive of being stopped now. Burn the pages. If the agents use a flamer or some other means of ignition, they can interrupt the ritual by burning the pages of the blasphemous book to ashes. The maelstrom of energy feeding the simulacrum of the warp storm overhead dissipates, and the cult's ritual is no longer keeping the herald trapped in the immaterium. However, the agents will have to contend with the cultists in combat, and the navigator will need time to plot a course back to real space. Combat Aftermath. As he dies, a dozen mouths will form on the bulging body of Sullius the Drowned, all chuckling, "I congratulate you on your victory, but it matters little. I brought this accursed vessel into the warp as an offering of it to Fausta Aeon, but we have already spread our master's blessings throughout it. I will be immortal, and you may cower for the little time you have left, watching as our master's blessings spread." Once he has spoken, the growth of boils and other swellings will reach its zenith, and his corpse will explode in bile and pus unless a flamer is turned on it immediately. Agents close to the pustulant explosion suffer one mortal wound, ignoring resilience. If she was rescued, Artina Caldo is grateful and will either find somewhere to hide, such as the Great Banquet Hall, or follow the agents at a distance. The agents can move on to the Chapel of Saints, page 36, or navigate back to the Prestige Arena, page 34. If Meldrake gave them the tracker, it indicates that the case is in the Prestige Arena. The Creeping Warp. With the Gellar field weakening, the immaterium exerts its malign unreality in the voidship. As the agents move towards the Gellar field sanctum, the psychic phenomena and warping of reality get steadily worse. Every time the agents begin a new scene, usually when they enter a new chamber of the ship, roll 2d6 on the immaterium effects table. Add +1 to the result each time you roll, so +1, +2, +3 etc. so that the effects become more intense as the adventure progresses. You can also use manifestations that play into the agents' backgrounds. Somnus has visions that can guide them to places in the ship, but the visions leave their mind full of static. Traitor starts unlocking memories of his hyper-violent criminal past without knowing whether they're real or not. Elata fears the possibility of his own murderous impulses. Lachlan senses whispered temptations to abandon the rest of the PCs. Honoria hears her saint's voice begging for Honoria's help, but the requests are blasphemous or endanger the mission. Corruption tests. When the rules or story call for a corruption test, the GM sets a DN based on the severity of the source of corruption and the player rolls dice equal to their agent's conviction. Agents have corruption levels. If the agent already has more than 5 corruption, the DN of all corruption and mutation tests is increased by +1, increasing to +2 at 11 corruption. The difficulty of corruption ranges from exposure to low-level radiation, DN1, to looking into the warp itself, DN9. If an agent fails a corruption test, the GM gains 1 point of ruin, see page 29, and the agent gains corruption equal to the difference between the number of icons rolled and the DN. If they roll a Wrath complication on a failed corruption test, they gain double the amount of corruption they otherwise would. If they roll a Wrath critical on any corruption test, the DN of the test is reduced by 2. A player can spend a single point of Wrath to reduce the DN of a corruption test by 1, to a minimum of DN1. Immaterium effects table. Roll 2d6. 2. The Labourer's Lament, page 28, begins playing over the room's speakers. 3. The Labourer's Lament plays over the room's speakers at full volume. Agents have to shout to be heard. 4. The agents hear Galba's voice over the Vox, speaking heretical words in a surprisingly upbeat tone. E.g., agents, good work in that last room. Your efforts are pointless in the face of the doom awaiting you, but good job. Corruption tests are made at +1 DN. 5. Corridors bend back on themselves with non-Euclidean geometry, and gravity slowly inverts. Ballistic skill and weapon skill tests are made at +1 DN. 6. Spaces grow smaller and more claustrophobic. Fear tests are made at +1 DN. 7. The agents return to a previous room, but something subtle has changed. 8. The walls bleed or scream, and tentacular cabling reaches out for the agents, causing 1 shock. 9. The agent's reflections step out of a mirrored surface, causing 1d3, 1dsix, divide the result by 2, shock. The reflections are insubstantial, can't be harmed, and leave the room before vanishing. 10. Visions of an old friend or enemy, perhaps from one of the agent's flashbacks, turning a corner just ahead. 11. An agent feels as though their clothing is choking them or peeling off their skin. +1 DN on any test that requires concentration. 12. Pick one agent. When they speak, other characters hear static and a second voice speaking over theirs, pronouncing terrible judgments and doom upon the other agents. Mutations. Agents that gain corruption run the horrific risk of mutation. Advanced rules for mutations can be found in the Wrath and Glory rulebook, but a simplified system is presented here. Whenever an agent gains corruption, they must check to see if they have more corruption points than their conviction. If they do, they must make a mutation test. To do this, an agent rolls their conviction against a DN equal to the number of corruption points they just gained. If they fail, they gain one of the following subtle mutations, as chosen by the Game Master. Perfected vocal cords. Your voice becomes enthrallingly beautiful. You gain +1 on tests to use your voice. On a complication, you speak the worst thing you could say at that moment, a secret, a shame, or an insult. Dreams of the Warp. Your mind has reshaped to better understand the warped logic of the immaterium. You gain +1 bonus dice on fear tests, but also suffer a +1 DN penalty on corruption tests. Laborer's Lament. If you spend a simple action singing or humming the Laborer's Lament, any psyker that hears you gains +1 bonus dice on their next psychic mastery test. The Prestige Arena. You enter an impressive vaulted arena with raised rows of seating coiled around a central stage. Servitors limp under sickly lumen light, appearing to be half necrotic flesh, half corroded steel. Their bodies are grotesquely altered masses of metal and mortal matter. A muscular man with old scars and hive gang tattoos is struck by the rusted saw blade of a combat servitor that appears to have multiple mutilated limbs either sutured onto, or bursting from, its torso. As the man falls, his wounds begin to overflow with maggots, which form a writhing mass that spreads around him. The arena exists to entertain guests of the Varonius dynasty with a penchant for violence. It is also used to execute those who defy the laws of Imperium. The festering abundance have seized it as an execution hall for the defiant. The 3 combat servitors of the arena are conveniently hypno-indoctrinated to attack any who enter, making them perfect for this purpose. With a successful DN3 awareness, int, test, agents can notice a large metal grate on one side of the staging area, behind which clustered human faces stare out into the arena. There is no obvious way to open the grate. It seems solely there so that the imprisoned can witness what is to befall them. To the left is a set of stairs leading down, presumably to access the cells. The direct approach. If the agents decide to fight their way past the combat servitors, threat profile on page 57 of the Varonius flotilla, in the arena, they enter just as one of the cultists throws Johann Astorf into the pit. The jeering cultists applaud loudly as the 3 combat servitors attack. If the servitors are defeated, a mob of 4 cultists, page 48, and an emaciated rogue psyker, page 48, descend into the arena whilst 2 other cultists attack from the downstairs area. If the agents defeat the servitors in fewer than 3 rounds, the cultists run rather than joining the fray with such formidable fighters. Sneaking in. If the agents try to sneak down the stairs, they need to make a DN for stealth, a test. If they fail, the 3 combat servitors will attack. If they succeed, they make it past the servitors, but notice 2 cultists protecting the door to the cells, and the telltale glint of 2 glowing red augmetic eyes in the shadows indicating another 2 combat servitors set to guard protocols. The agents can try to dispatch them quickly with a silent ambush, or if they are clever, they can make a DN3 tech, int, test to reprogram 1 combat servitor to attack the cultists, avoiding the need for a fight altogether. The second servitor is befouled by a strange grease that flows from a nearby nutrient tube. A DN for tech, in, test reveals it runs to the ship's Gellar field Sanctum. This substance has infected the servitor with the Gellar pox. Instead of attacking, this servitor will instead to chuckle unnaturally through the remains of its mouth. Agents who investigate the nutrient tube also notice it has developed a set of small teeth which gnash helplessly whenever they draw close. The key to the cells is carried by a cultist, but agents can override the lock with a DN for tech, int, test, or kick the door open with a DN6 athletics, s, test. Failure on either of these tests may alert the servitors in the arena. Rescuing the prisoners. Inside the cells are 20 terrified people, a mix of crew and passengers. They are weepingly grateful to be rescued, and despite their brief imprisonment, a few already show signs of infection by mundane but quite dangerous diseases. A DN3 Medici, int, test can be made to treat them. If successful, an agent will note that some of the crew, mainly those with augmetics, seem to be far sicker than the rest, with the flesh around their implants appearing inflamed. These unfortunates are victims of the Gellar pox, which will turn them into mutant monstrosities like the Vox Shamblers if the infection is not burned out of the Gellar field generator within a solar cycle. If they haven't already rescued him from the arena, one of these crew members is Johann Astorf, who can easily be identified by tattered remains of his fine uniform, which bears the household crest of Lord Meldrake. He clutches a case that is manacled to one of his wrists. If present, Elata senses a strangely familiar presence from the case. With a successful DN3 awareness, int, test, he realizes that the case holds Eldari spirit stones, far from the infinity circuit where they should be placed for protection. This is an outrage to Elata, as it would be to any of his kin, for every spirit stone holds the preserved essence of a deceased Eldari. The Steward in Chains. Johann Astorf was one of Lord Meldrake's favoured officers during his days in the Astra Militarum. He accompanied his lord out of the service, acting as a steward and trusted comrade for the nascent Meldrake dynasty. Unlike his lord, who chafed at the aristocratic lifestyle, Johann would have happily enjoyed the position of steward to a powerful member of the nobility to his dying day. Unfortunately for him, Meldrake had other plans. If the agents wish to retrieve the spirit stones, Johann will protest. With a successful persuasion, fell, or intimidation, will, test opposed by Johann's insight, fell, of 5, an agent can convince him that the case isn't worth his life. Alternatively, the agents can make a strength test opposed by Johann's strength of 2 to take the case from him, or simply leave it with him. Lord Meldrake will not be pleased if Johann returns without the case, however, a fact Johann is quick to remind the agents of. Escape. As they are leaving, the agents will notice a small vent open in the ground beneath the arena, and several small and unnatural creatures emerge. They are humanoid, around 1 foot tall, and burble nonsentially, emitting spark-filled belches as they do so. These are glitchlings, page 47, demonic fusions of machinery and malice. They have no interest in the agents just yet, instead focusing on the combat servitors, or Johann if appropriate. They begin pulling them towards the ventilation shaft. If interrupted they will flee, flinging curses as they go, but the agents may notice that their equipment seems to fail if they get close to the creatures. See the glitchling threat profile on page 47 for details. The vent leads to the bilge. See page 27 of the Flotilla Guide for more. The agents can pass through the Prestige Arena to the Chapel of Saints, where any surviving NPCs can take shelter, or they can navigate to the Grand Library if they have not already. If so, Somnus senses a surging maelstrom of psychic power from that direction. The Chapel of Saints. Faith is of the utmost importance to most denizens of the Imperium, for all know that only the God Emperor could have preserved humanity for so long amid such a hostile galaxy. Thus, chapels are a common sight in the 41 St. millennium, and the Chapel of Saints is a striking example of worshipful architecture. Even here the presence of Nurgle servants is felt, however. The corridors leading to the chapel show signs of a struggle, bloody handprints on the walls, and a shriveled corpse crouched in a corner with its hands pressed to its face. It is dark enough inside that the agents must go into the room to see properly. The Chapel of Saints is an imposing vaulted room with a diamond-checkered floor and pillars stretching up towards a ceiling wreathed in shadows. Sound is unnaturally deadened here, yet your footfalls seem to ring out. 5 shrines to saints ring the chapel, and a kneeling figure rocks back and forth before each one, mumbling incomprehensible words. Their hoods hide their faces, but their forms are visible in the light of the thousands of candles spluttering around each shrine. Agents can make a DN for awareness, int, test to notice that the figures seem connected to the shrines by something. Anyone who shifts on this test also notices a figure lurking deep in the shadows beyond the altar of the shrine, a hideous, bulbous creature that seems at once reluctant to enter the shrine proper, but eager to attack at the agents. The worshippers. Before the ambush is sprung, the agents may approach the kneeling figures. It is clear that something is terribly wrong with them. Their hoods hide a melding of machine and pallid flesh far more unnatural than that of even the most ambitious tech priest. They are connected by trails of rotting musculature and wire to the statues, apparently attempting to meld with the cool and unyielding stone depictions of the saints. If Sister Honoria is present, she knows instinctively what is happening. These unnatural, tainted beings seek to desecrate the chapel. Other agents may make a DN for insight, fell, test to realize this. Just then, the previously looming figure of a nightmare Hulk, page 47, charges at the agents. Agents who failed the test to notice the Hulk are ambushed, which means they cannot act in the first round. Any agent can choose to spend a point of glory to avoid the ambush and take their turn as normal. The 5 figures kneeling before the shrines are emaciated rogue psychers, page 48, among the first to swear fealty to Thaddeus and the newly infected Gellar field generator, see page 41. Guided by instincts they barely understand, they are attempting to defile the Chapel of Saints. As long as at least 2 are alive, the chapel is sufficiently profane to allow the Nightmare Hulk to act normally. If 3 or more are slain, the sacred space is cleansed against corruption, inflicting the hindered condition on the Nightmare Hulk. See reference handout 1. Desecration undone. By the end of the encounter the chapel will likely lie in ruin. However, Sister Honoria senses that the chapel can be reconsecrated and fortified, requiring a DN for leadership, Fel, test. It has 2 heavy doors that can be barricaded with pews. Once the chapel has been reconsecrated, all agents regain 3 shock. If the agents rescued any crew, they can be left here in comparative safety until the Gellar field is restored. A regroup, page 39, in the chapel restores an additional 4 wounds to each agent. Revered Saints. Sister Honoria does not need to make a test to recognize the 5 figures honored in the chapel. Of them, the most prominent by far is Saint Alicia Dominica, the patron saint and founder of the Adepta Sororitas. She is famed throughout the Empire for ending the tyrannical rule of High Lord Gode van Dyer, and founding the Adepta Sororitas itself. Other agents with the Imperium keyword may make a DN3 Scholar, int, test to identify Alicia Dominica. The Song and the Garden. From the chapel Galba suggests 2 routes, via either the Hydroponics Garden or the Perpetual Opera. He contacts the agents via Voxbead. You're alive. Saints be praised, perhaps Veronius was right about you. The Gellar Field Sanctum still lies ahead. You can pass through either the Hydroponics Garden or the Perpetual Opera to reach it. One of our senior tech priests, Broder Abel, is in the gardens. He's alive, but is only transmitting machine code over the Vox. Alouette de Mornay is in the opera, a talent worth preserving. Thankfully no abomination would dare set foot inside that sacred space. The Hydroponics Garden. As you approach the Hydroponics Garden you can smell the noxious stench of decaying plant life. Fruit rots on the trees with a sickeningly sweet smell, dripping pestilent pulp onto the bloody lawns. Bile clogs the streams and ponds. The gilded paths glisten in the warm glow of the artificial sun suspended over the treetops, as though the marble itself was oozing. The path splits in 2, with one path winding its way through an orchard, while the other skirts the edges of several ponds filled with bubbling brown fluids. With a successful DN3 awareness, int, tests, the agents can see small shapes moving in the orchard, knocking putrefying fruit from diseased trees, and beyond that a wide trail of black rot worming its way towards the center of the grove. The other path winds beside large stacks of sparking machinery that appears designed to irrigate and maintain the gardens. Whichever path the agents choose to pursue, the next logical location is the Sanctified Spa, page 40. Nauseous Orchard. The orchard has become the domain of a plague-bearer, page 46, a powerful demon of Nurgle whose presence is corrupting the gardens and the food grown there. If left unchecked, the crew will be infected by countless diseases, natural and unnatural, even if the Gellar field is restored. If the agents choose to go to the orchard, they can find the plague-bearer with ease by following the trail of rotten fruit and wilting trees. However, the larger demon is not alone. A mob of 7 glitchlings, page 47, waits in the trees, chuckling nervously as they prepare to attack. Ask the agents to make a DN for awareness, int, test. If they fail, they notice the plague-bearer but not the glitchlings, and are ambushed by the smaller diamonds if they move any closer, with the plague-bearer lumbering into the fray after 2 rounds of loud combat. If the agents succeed, they notice the glitchlings, and can choose to avoid them, though they will likely be drawn to a noisy battle with the plague-bearer. The agents can also choose to avoid battle entirely with a successful DN5 stealth, A, test, though the diamonds will pounce on any who fail this test immediately. These diamonds cannot be reasoned with, though they may chatter nonsense or sling vile threats. Their minds are set solely on corruption in the name of spreading Nurgle's many gifts. Aggressive agriculture. Several large machines sit to one side of the garden, with pipes, cabling and inscrutable conduits running from them to the surrounding plants. As the agents draw closer, they notice a group of 7 people in menial uniforms attending to the machinery. A successful DN for awareness, int, test reveals that this initial impression is wrong. The laborers are cutting at the machine and themselves, and seem to be melding with the cabling by inserting it into their rotting wounds. If the agents draw close, which they must pass by, one of the laborers notices them. He points, and with a sickening cry accompanied by a squall of static roars, the pox is here. All is one, machine and bilious flesh. Join us in bliss and rot. As he finishes speaking, a long tube erupts from the machine and drives itself down his throat, nutrient fluid spraying across his mutating form. A moment later, if the agents have not already opened fire, the group consisting of 7 Vox Shamblers attacks. Beyond the gardens. Whichever way they go, surviving agents find their way to the maintenance bay where Broder Abel has barricaded himself. A single Vox Shambler pounds on the door, repeating the following: Priest. The pox wants you, machine and flesh both. Come worship before it, and be remade. Let us sicken and rust as one, and be born again. There is no rebirth without suffering, Broder. Nothing new without the passing of the old. Let us become of one flesh, cog and sinew as your God demands. After the mutant is dispatched, you can narrate this without combat if you would prefer. The noise gets the attention of the tech priest. Broder is in a state of terror, his many implants struggling to suppress the fear that courses through his biological parts. The agents can persuade Broder to open the door with DN for persuasion, test, though Traitor can simply promise to protect the tech priest and achieve the same result without a test. If they gain access to the maintenance bay, Broder has advanced medici equipment and can restore 5 wounds to 1 agent. They also have a stock of ammunition. The agents regain 5 ammo between them. Even if they are unwilling to open the door under such dangerous conditions, now that they have come close enough for Broder's systems to identify their Vox beads, the tech priest can communicate with the agents directly. He is terrified. Though diamonds and unnatural disease are bad enough, he has been monitoring systems through the ship, witnessed machine and flesh alike become infected. He has also seen entities that appear to be unholy fusions of flesh and machine. A mockery of the integration through proper worship of the OM and Isaiah.it is entirely illogical. I have run through 3.1 to the 10th possibilities, and all outcomes point to our demise. Either the Omnicia has abandoned us, or we are somewhere beyond his reach. How do we fix this? Once he has calmed down somewhat, Broder will tell the agents that the Gellar field does seem to be linked to the spreading corruption in some way. Via uncorrupted cogitators he has been able to learn that the machine spirits closest to the Gellar field Sanctum began to malfunction first, and the fluctuations in the Gellar field itself seem to be increasing. Broder suspects that the Gellar field is at the heart of the infection, reminding Traitor of the strange corrosion they previously noticed. If Traitor brings up the menial, Thaddeus, Broder will note with concern that whoever was previously banging on the door did speak of Thaddeus, calling him the prime vector. The Perpetual Opera. This grand opera hall has seen better days. The scent of mouldering velvet and mildewed wood underlies the other, fresher smells of blood, viscera, and oil. You emerge into the dress circle and look down towards the stage where the show, it seems, is in full swing. The Perpetual Opera earned its moniker as its augmentically enhanced choir members sang ceaseless praise to the Emperor, working in shifts to ensure constant worship. For the first time in centuries, their song is absent, or at least it is no longer in praise of any emperor. The opera is a pandemonium of bileless bodies, corrupted and transformed into a mixture of twisted machine and rotting flesh. Behind it all can be heard the incongruently soft tones of the laborer's lament. The Gellarpox corruption is worse in the opera than perhaps anywhere else on the ship, save the Gellar field Sanctum itself. Many of the performers had Lord Haler implants of one form or another, and these have grown in size, warped almost beyond recognition, expanding across flesh to turn augmetic enhancements into hideous abomination. Most are now rife with corruption, their minds twisted beyond reason. While the agents consider how to proceed, have them make a DN for awareness, int, test. Those who succeed spot small figures scuttling about the feet of the mutants glitchlings spawned by the Gellarpox. As they move about, lights set into the opera hall seem to flicker when they draw near. Those looking for Alouette in particular do not spot her. She is either absent, or so mutated as to be unrecognizable. If the agents prefer, one or more may attempt to sneak past with a DN5 stealth, test. Any who are discovered are not attacked, but rather invited to join in the performance. This offer usually takes the form of one of the performers reaching into some open wound or gaping abscess, retrieving a bundle of pulsating flesh and wires, and offering it to the agent. Those who agree are unharmed, but must make a DN5 corruption test. Those who decline are attacked. The Vox Shamblers form 2 mobs of 4 each, with a further 2 mobs of 3 glitchlings interspersed among them. If 1 or 2 agents are attacked, only a single mob involves itself at first. If more than 2 agents are involved, the entire opera attacks them. Backstage. Behind the performers on the stage, the velvet curtain is slick and rotten, chunks of it sliding to the ground with a wet rustle. Through the gaps in the curtain, the agents can glimpse an ongoing struggle and occasional gouts of flame. With a DN3 awareness, int, test, the agents can identify the figure as the opera singer Alouette de Mornay. While her comrades have fallen to mutation, her faith and perhaps more importantly, her ever-present hand flamer has preserved her. She has been hiding from the mutants and ambushing them when opportunity arises, but has been discovered. If left behind, she will soon succumb. If rescued, Alouette is breathlessly grateful for their help and can be sent to hide in the comparatively protected opera storerooms, or she can go to the Chapel of Saints. In either case, she looks sadly at the remains of her former comrades before setting them ablaze with a final gout of purifying fire, then fleeing. If the agents proceed from here rather than returning to the Hydroponics Garden to rescue Broder Abel, the tech priest uses Captain Galba to relay the information they would otherwise explain about the Nurgle infection of the Gellar field, see page 41. Regroup. Agents who take an hour of resting in a safe place can regroup. Any agent with the Medici skill can restore wounds equal to their Medici, int, pool to a single agent during a regroup. The Sanctified Spa. All paths to the Gellar field lead past the Sanctified Spa, a temple centered around sacred waters taken from St. Bertal's shrine on Enoch. By now, the voidship itself has begun to protest, the inconsistent Gellar field and the twisting effects of the warp competing to tear the herald apart. Very little time remains to fix things. Oasis of Peace. The Sanctified Spa is a marble-walled complex containing pools where those of true faith and enviable influence may cleanse themselves in the sacred waters of Enoch. The waters are recycled in a closed system to maintain purity, with regular benedictions made to ensure the water's ongoing sanctity. Despite the endless assault of Gellarpox mutants, cultists, and even a handful of diamonds, the sanctum remains secure, defended by the trio of blind priests who tend the temple and, perhaps more importantly, a contingent of armsmen. Of the latter only a handful remain, tattered and bleeding, but kept standing through their faith. The priests, 2 older men called Pietars and Firmitars, and a younger novitiate called Veritas, explain that they and the Armsmen have held fast through many attacks. The older priests offer a prayer and anointment with the waters, see a brief respite below, while Veritas suggests a more radical approach. She mentions that auto-consecration systems used to bless the waters might also be used to bless other liquids such as the promethium in the ship's auxiliary fuel conduits. A brief respite. Agents who allow themselves to be anointed in the shrine waters here gain certain benefits. Each agent may choose one of the following options. Recover 3 shock. Heal 1 wound. Remove 1 corruption. Additionally, any trace of chaos taint about their clothes is cleansed. Purging the herald. If the agents take up Veritas' suggestion, they may make a DN for tech, int, test to reroute the ship's fuel systems through the auto-consecrators, systems that use sacred herbs, incense, and the prayers of the priests to renew the sacred waters. The older priests are aghast, but admit it could work. It will taint the waters for a time, much to Captain Galba's horror. If the agents choose to do this, it will take some time for the newly blessed promethium to circulate throughout the ship. Flamers using this fuel do an additional +3 ED to any threat with the demon or Nurgle keywords, and then the agents can purposely breach the fuel conduits which run throughout the ship to douse an area. Anyone caught in such areas when they are set alight will burn to a crisp in holy fire. If the agents are successful, Captain Galba reports that a purposeful breach was created in the banquet hall fuel lines, and the mutants assaulting the door were burned or driven off. Half the banquet hall was also set ablaze, however, and the captain is livid. If the agents were not successful or ignored Veritas' suggestion, then the mutants break through, killing half the guests in the banquet hall before being driven back. Galba is injured but alive, and mentions that he is looking forward to recuperating in the Sanctified Spa. The fate of the Herald. By now, the agents may well be wondering if they can be saved at all. The Imperium is notorious for rooting out even a hint of corruption with our mercy, so the agents may reasonably fear that they will all face death even if they return to the fleet. Broder may be able to assuage their fears. While the fate of the Herald is uncertain, it may yet be salvageable. Considering the dire shortage of ships and weapons within the Gilead system, the tech priest is optimistic that the vessel and all aboard it won't be destroyed for the mere possibility that the taint of chaos lingers. The Battle of the Waters. Just as the agents are preparing to leave, one of the armsmen shouts a warning a fresh wave of mutants is approaching. If the agents choose to do so, they may leave the armsmen to handle this. If the agents stay, they will quickly notice that this is a much more substantial attack than previously seen. 2 mobs of 7 Vox Shamblers flood the corridors. If the agents stay and manage to keep 1 or 2 of the mutants alive, they will spit insults and cower, explaining that all must bow before the Gellar field generator and accept the blessings of Fausta Aeon. Sergeant Kravis. Among the Voidsmen is Sergeant Kravis, who recognizes Marius if he is present. If Sergeant Kravis was the sole survivor of their mission, he greets the scout with a touch of excessive familiarity, but also with genuine dedication. He swears to follow Marius into the gates of the Eye of Terror itself, and means it. If Marius saved all of the Voidsmen during his flashback, word has spread of his deeds, and a sense of hushed awe falls over the troops. One whispers a line of sacred text. And lo, the Emperor shall send his angels to walk among ye. The dedication of the defenders is renewed. This seems useful. If the agents think to do so, they may find bringing some of the sacred waters along to use as a weapon. Substantially depleted as the waters are, especially if Promethium is about to be routed through the Sanctum systems, the monks who tend it are willing to provide only 6 glass vials of the holy waters, though if Sister Hunaria is present she can convince them to part with 10. Each vial may be used to bless a melee weapon, in which case it does an additional plus for ED against any threat with the Chaos keyword, or it may be thrown as a weapon against such servants of the ruinous powers. The Gellar Field Sanctum. As the agents proceed, it becomes clear that whatever horror has invaded the Herald has made its home in the Gellar Field Sanctum. All corridors and access vents leading to the Sanctum are blocked by thick walls of stinking flesh and grasping coils of wire, symptoms of a rapidly advancing Gellarpox infection. Though they can be slowly cut through by blade and gun, it will be far faster to use the newly sanctified Promethium fuel lines to burn their way past. Agents who attempt to blast through consume 1 ammo while doing so for each of the 3 blocked tunnels. Agents who attempt to cut their way through lose 1 shock for each tunnel. Breaking the fuel lines and setting them alight costs nothing, and the hideous screams of the burning flesh and machinery testify to this method's effectiveness against machinery or creatures affected by the Gellarpox. Alternatively, agents may deploy 1 of their vials of blessed waters to clear each of the 3 hazards, which has a similar effect to the blessed Promethium. Beyond lies the main chamber of the Gellar Field Sanctum, a vaulted room like a cathedral. Wires and cables wind endlessly through carved pillars and archivolts into the shadowy heights of a ceiling where only the pulsing lights of power cables briefly dispel the dark with an ominous glow. The heart of infection. In the center of the sanctum, a hideous mass of machine and tainted flesh congeals into a tumescent heart that spews forth a noxious fog, the Gellar field generator, corrupted by Thaddeus. 7 Vox Shamblers stand in formation around the generator. In unison, they sing a twisted version of the laborer's lament. The laborer's damnation. Suffer in service, twice damned fools, your lives so dim and fleeting, an emperor's ever weaker tools, to keep his dead heart beating. Toil ye now in untrust, for cruel and careless master, toil ye in the ruin and dust, but rot and death grow faster. Yes, toil ye in the ruin and dust, and hear our father's laughter. Snaking tentacles reach out from Gellar field generator towards a raised walkway of corroding plasteel and into a baroque bank of controls located on a suspended walkway. Before these stands a man of immense proportions, with strange, bulbous protrusions across his body and the tatters of a menial worker's uniform. His hands twitch as he conducts the ghoulish chorus of mutants below in time with the sickening noises coming from the Gellar field. One arm ends in a massive claw, once a piece of industrial equipment. Traitor recognizes Thaddeus, the menial servant he found near the machinery during his flashback. Thaddeus was instrumental in corrupting the Gellar field generator and now enjoys an exalted position. During lulls in the song, he screams the following: "The promise of Fausta Aeon holds true. No more work, no more pointless labor. Now we and the tools of our labor are one, a rotting whole greater than the sum of its parts. Embrace the rot and ruin. Come and give worship at Gellar's field, the vector of our Lord's blessing. Come and be made so much more than whole." As the agents watch the ritual unfold, a handful of other workers and crew approach. They are cowed, afraid, and clearly wounded. As they kneel before the generator, one of the mutants anoints them with sickening fluid scraped from the flesh encrusting the tainted machine. The recipient screams, then arises, their flesh already beginning to change. Before them lies an abomination, and the corruption only grows. The agents must act fast before the ship is overcome. A final choice. The agents have a choice to make: TRTO purify the Gellar field and escape the warp once the ship's navigator has recovered, or cause the Gellar field generator to overload and detonate. This latter option is incredibly risky, as Galba will inform them. If the field is destroyed, the ship will have to return to real space immediately. The navigator is not yet fully recovered, and such an action could result in the ship returning anywhere in the Gilead system, potentially in the heart of its star, for example. Still, if the corruption spreads any further, it will hardly matter, so something must be done. Purify the field. Purifying the Gellar field keeps the ship in working order at the risk of lingering corruption. Above Thaddeus, several fuel lines can be seen, and breaching them could release a torrent of blessed promethium, page 40, burning it may cleanse the corruption, and the demonic flesh should be more vulnerable to this than the machinery beneath. Any agent may attempt an DN2 insight, will, test to consider the implications of a potentially tainted ship returning from an unscheduled warp excursion. In normal circumstances, the ship would be destroyed out of hand. However, such a loss may be too much to bear in isolated Gilead, and Fleet Command is likely to attempt to preserve it despite the risks. Detonate the generator. Destroying the generator means that the malignant heart of the Gellarpox infection is definitely gone, but the ship will be severely damaged in the process and unable to traverse the warp until it can be repaired. There is also a small chance that it will destroy the ship entirely, or at worst trap it in the warp indefinitely, a fate quite literally worse than death. However, this is the only way to be absolutely sure of purging the infection. Though some mutants will remain, the Gellarpox seems to be spreading from the generator, so destroying it should remove the source of the infection. If the agents attempt this, Galba will attempt to dissuade them, but ultimately the choice is theirs. If they seem insistent, the navigator will be dosed with stimulants and be told to attempt the translation back to real space before the Gellar field collapses entirely. Get it done. If they wish to detonate the generator, the agents may attempt a DN for Tech, Int, test to realize that they must access two specific cogitators located somewhere in the alcoves on the Sanctum's upper walkway, then access the main Gellar field control panel on the raised platform behind the generator. Doing so can overload the generator, ensuring its destruction. Alternatively, the agents may simply wish to start shooting at the generator, but unless they have found or created a substantial cache of explosives, or come up with some other devious solution, this is not likely to work. The mass of flesh is growing faster than even concentrated gunfire can destroy it. Unfortunately, the machinery in the Sanctum is antiquated and baroque, so finding the correct cogitators for these tasks is easier said than done. Identifying the necessary cogitators from a distance requires a DN5 Tech, Int, test. Otherwise, the agents must spend an action to physically check a cogitator to see if it is the correct one. Once they find the correct cogitator, they must make a DN3 Tech, Int, test to complete their task. They may attempt this many times if they fail, but their time is limited. See the Gellarpox mutants, below. If the agents simply wish to flood the room with promethium, they must make it past Thaddeus and make a DN3 weapon skill, I, test to rupture one of the pipes with a suitable weapon. Rupturing 3 of the pipes is enough to douse the entire room below, and it can be ignited with weapons fire. The mutants will not stand idly by while this happens. The Gellarpox mutants. While simple enough in theory, the agent's task is complicated by the presence of the mutants, who notice the agents shortly after they enter the room and leap to action to protect the generator under the instruction of Thaddeus. The mutants take cover behind various scattered plasteel crates and barrels, or within the alcoves on the upper walkways, and try to delay the agents for as long as possible. Thaddeus defends the upper alcoves, attacking any agents who attempt to get near the cogitators or fuel lines. After 3 rounds of combat, one particularly large pustule on the Gellar field generator bursts, unleashing a wave of sickly gore and a stench so rancid it instantly fills the entire room. Moments later, a poxbringer crawls its way through the minor breach, in reality, the first of many such abominations that will appear if the agents are unsuccessful. The poxbringer takes a moment to inhale the fetid air before moving to attack the nearest agent. Take cover! As the agents, hopefully, succeed in either detonating or purging the Gellar field, they must make a DN for Athletics S test to escape the room before it is engulfed in flames of one sort or another. Those who fail take 10+ for ED damage. There is one exception: if the generator is purged, the sanctified promethium will not harm anyone who, in the GM's view, has shown true faith in the Emperor during the adventure. This may appear to be simple luck or good fortune, but any who held fast to the Emperor are spared by the flames. The end at last. Once the agents have either purged or detonated the Gellar field generator, the fight for the heart and soul of the Herald Veronius is over. If the agents routed the sanctified promethium into the chamber and ignited it, read aloud the following, there is a momentary silence just before the fire takes, and then suddenly the room is engulfed in a deafening roar and overwhelming heat. The screams of the mutants are cut short by the inferno, and the flesh that coats the generator seems to writhe and scream as it does so. Those who manage to escape watch as the flames slowly die down, leaving behind a swath of destruction. Servitors are stripped of flesh, sensitive machinery lies in ruins, and all is charred and smoking. In the midst of the destruction, however, the Gellar field hums weakly. Designed to withstand sabotage, fires, sudden decompression, and the trials of battle, it alone remains functional. Reality slowly reasserts itself on the ship. If the agent set the generator to detonate, read aloud the following. Warning klaxons and emergency lights blare into life, filling the room with a disorienting cacophony. You flee the area as fast as you can, emergency bulkheads slamming into place in your wake. Moments later, a series of massive explosions and sense-grating shrieks shake the corridors around you. A brief second before, the ship breaches the warp and returns to real space with a sickening crash. All behind you lies in ruins, and what lies outside the battered hull of the Herald Veronius is as of yet unknown. A nightmare made flesh. The Poxbringer is a terrifyingly powerful demon for a party of this power level. If the agents attempt to fight it directly, they will almost certainly lose some members, and potentially fail completely. Be sure that the players are aware that this creature is beyond their means to combat, and their best method of dispatching it is rerouting the blessed waters or detonating the generator. Aftermath: purging the generator. If the agents purge the generator, the ship emerges from the warp a few hours later beside the Veronius flotilla. Strike teams from other ships, armsmen strengthened by 5 primaries intercessors from the Absolvers, enter the ship and sweep it, purging every last physical remnant of the cult and their mutants over the coming days. It will take more time to truly cleanse the last remnants of malign influence, but Jackal Veronius is reluctant to destroy the ship completely if it can be salvaged, not when ships are such a precious resource in the isolated system. In the coming days, after they have been checked for corruption and given a little time to recover, Lord Veronius speaks with the agents directly, meeting them aboard his flagship, the Ducal Circlet. He is an austere figure, but not without some wit. He also knows how to make the best of a bad situation. For saving the ship and its Gellar field, Veronius is pleased with the agents. He praises their effort and service to his family, taking a moment to comment on his own good instincts in identifying them as potentially useful agents in the first place. He offers the agents the use of the Herald Veronius as a means of traveling about the system, though he underlines that this gift is in fact a substantial burden of duty. The system is on the brink of collapse, and his advisors have already noted dozens of dangerous situations which require the attention of a capable strike team. Aftermath detonating the generator. If the Gellar field was detonated, the dangerous jump back to real space is only partially successful. Large chunks of the Herald Varonius are left behind, and the ship finds itself more than a week's travel from the fleet. The trip back is fraught with danger, as the agents and the remaining armsmen fight a slow war of attrition with the remainder of the festering abundance and the Gellarpox mutants. Eventually the fleet lends its aid, as above, but Varonius is less effusive in his praise. He does note that he wasn't there, and is certain the agents did only what was necessary to succeed. Above, he grants the agents the use of the Herald in this service, though even after repairs the ship remains visibly marred by its experience. Aftermath all is lost. If the Herald was destroyed or lost, Varonius meets with the agents only to take their measure. He doubts if they are truly capable individuals, but unfortunately has very few resources to work with. Assuming they do not outright insult what is likely the most influential person in the system, Varonius tells them he will assign some other tasks to judge their merit, and grants them the use of an ancient and barely functioning shuttle for this purpose. During their meeting with Varonius, ask the players questions about the resolution. Do they tell Varonius they consider Captain Galba incompetent? Do they mention Lord Meldrake's spirit stones, or arrange for them to be returned to the Ealdri via Ilata? The Herald Varonius. The crew of the Herald who survived the infestation remain on the ship, assisting the agents as their duty demands. Keep a record of how they interacted with these NPCs, and remember to have them show up from time to time and refer back to the events of the infestation. Lord Varonius provides additional crew to make up the numbers of those lost during the incursion, though as with all things in the Gilead system, experienced crew are hard to come by. There are lots of ways that this adventure could lead into a campaign. The festering abundance let events on the Herald Varonius get out of hand, but what if some of the cult remains on other plants and vessels, plotting the downfall of the Imperium? What might they do next? The Herald Varonius itself is the size of a small city, with a crew of thousands. The cult may have other cells as yet undiscovered, perhaps in the bilge. Lord Radovar Meldrake and his steward have been smuggling Xenos artifacts to an unknown buyer in the flotilla. This mysterious patron could have terrible designs for the inhabitants of the flotilla. Alouette de Mornay is part of a growing conspiracy to replace the head of the Varonius dynasty. Left unchecked, this could result in a full-scale civil war in the largest fleet in the system. If Galba remains in command of the Herald, will his incompetence lead to future problems? Or could he prove a useful figurehead for the agents, as he is quite easy to manipulate? Alternatively, if he is kicked off the ship, will he swear revenge on the agents?